So a pretty cloudy start to Sunday morning. The potential for some slightly heavier bursts of rain to push in across south-east England. There's some slight uncertainty in regards to its exact track, so do keep up to date with the forecast if you are running the London Marathon. Showers building up elsewhere, and we'll see further rain push in across north-east Scotland, and that could turn wintry over the higher ground as we see some colder air dig in, and feeling rather bitter in the strong winds developing here as well. This cold air is going to push its way southwards across the rest of the UK as we head throughout Sunday evening and into Monday. The rain continuing to clear its way off the southeast as well. Some slightly clearer spells developing here and there, but generally a lot of cloud around again first thing on Monday morning. Some outbreaks of rain persisting throughout the day, and again those showers now probably turning to sleet even at some lower levels across northern Scotland. The briskest winds on Monday will be across the eastern coastal area where we see this tight squeeze in the isobars, but into Tuesday there are signs that a ridge of high pressure will start to build in and help settle things down a touch. But for all of us in that northerly flow of air, temperatures are going to be dropping down quite considerably. Bye-bye.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in an hour, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. They could have picked a better picture of her, look at that! Yes, and in a few moments' time, I'll be mucking the week with comedian Mark Doland. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Foreign Office has confirmed the Prime Minister chaired an emergency Cobra meeting this morning as fierce fighting in Sudan enters its second week. Sudan's military claims foreign nationals, including from the UK, US, France and China, are to be evacuated and says it will help with evacuation plans. The World Health Organization says more than 400 people have been killed and thousands more injured since the violence began. Government forces there are battling with a paramilitary group over control of the capital, Khartoum. The SNP has appointed Stuart MacDonald as the party's new treasurer, following the resignation of MSP Colin Beattie. Mr Beattie stepped down after he was arrested by police investigating SNP finances. He was later released without charge. The party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was also arrested and questioned before being released. Police are investigating the use of £600,000 in donations meant for the independence referendum. A serving member of the British Armed Forces has appeared in court, charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. 36-year-old Thomas Newsome is accused of sharing highly sensitive military information. He's alleged to have shared a 10-page document through social media to 2 senior officers who had clearance and 1 civilian who didn't. Prosecutors claim if the information was leaked, it would have caused a real and immediate threat to British people outside of the UK. He's due in court again on Friday. The family of Stephen Lawrence have held a memorial service in Trafalgar Square to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack while waiting for a bus in southeast London. It's alleged the original investigation was hindered by racism and police corruption, meaning it took almost 20 years for 2 of his killers to face justice. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, said it was a day to celebrate the work of the Lawrence family.
We're here today to celebrate and remember Stephen Lawrence's life, his legacy, but also the extraordinary work that's taken place by his family, Doreen Lawrence, by their team, to address the issues of equality, diversity and inclusion.
Labour have condemned Dominic Raab's behaviour since his resignation yesterday as appalling, saying he shouldn't be blaming his accusers for his downfall. The former Deputy Prime Minister resigned yesterday after an investigation upheld some of the bullying allegations made against him. Mr Raab claims a minority of those within Whitehall are effectively trying to block government. Well, Shadow Health Minister Andrew Gwynn told us those who've blown the whistle have a right to do so.
Why the Prime Minister, who will have known about these allegations, they weren't a secret, sought to appoint him to the second most senior position in government as Deputy Prime Minister. But also why he didn't sack Dominic Raab on receiving this report, why he allowed Dominic Raab to leave on his own terms, and worst of all, doubling down on the whistleblowers, on the victims. I think that letter that Dominic Raab produced in his resignation was quite frankly appalling and showed no humility and no contrition.
The CBI has suspended all policy and membership activity after allegations of rape and sexual assault prompted some of its biggest names to quit. Dozens of members, including John Lewis, NatWest, Jaguar Land Rover and BT, are among those to have pulled out of the trade body. The CBI says it shares the shock and revulsion over the allegations. And tributes have poured in for the Australian entertainer Barry Humphries, who's died at the age of 89. During a 7-decade career, he was best known for his alter egos, including Dame Edna Everage and Celeste Patterson. Actor Jason Donovan described him as an entertaining genius, and the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese paid tribute to him as the brightest star in a galaxy of personas. He died in hospital, surrounded by his family. You're up to date on GB News now. It's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And now it's time for Muck the Week. Speaking of week, Rishi Sunak giving in to what looks to me like a concerted effort by activist civil servants with hurty feelings, making efforts to bring ministers down. Listen.
Some officials who had to work with Dominic Raab were offered therapy. Behaviour was described as nasty, horrible and manipulative.
I saw him seething at other senior people, hard staring at you, cold fury. It was pretty sinister. And raising his voice. Lots of it was what I'd describe as microaggressions.
We've had reports of civil servants bursting into tears before and after meetings, civil servants actually being physically sick because of the fear.
Allegations about civil servants being too scared to go into his office. Even the rather notorious claim that he once got so angry in a meeting that he threw a tomato from a Pret salad at someone.
Well, it just seems odd that the civil servants brought forward complaints that happened, some of them 2.5 and 4.5 years ago on the same day. Back in the real world, you wouldn't be able to do that, but weak old Rishi let him go to save his own skin. Another one bites the dust. Dominic Raab resigned.
Thank you very much. Just one final question. Did you throw the tomatoes?
And then after eco-trustafarian activists took to the racecourse last week at Aintree, this week it was a turn of our friendly Just Stop Oil protesters who decided to disrupt the snooker with some sort of orange powder. They're demanding that the government immediately stop all new UK fossil fuel projects and are calling on UK sporting institutions to step into a civil resistance against the government's genocidal policies. But I don't think they quite understood that fossil fuels are involved in a whole lot more than just providing petrol and heat. Here's one of them now with the Mogster.
You have 6 children. Do you not care about their future? Do you not care about them being able to feed themselves? Because right now, under this government's policies, your 6 children are heading towards a future that is filled with life-threatening extreme weather events, crop failures, famine, war. Suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
I think you've taken the evidence for an evolving climate and then applied it in an extraordinarily extreme way and are forgetting about the enormous advantages.
I can't believe you're talking to me about an evolving climate.
Well, the climate is...
People are dying.
But
And Channel 4, our state-owned broadcaster, sunk to even lower lows after bringing us Naked Attraction, where you choose a match based on their genitals, and a ghastly programme where grown adults parade naked in front of minors. Instead of covering the coronation, they'll be showing a film on disgraced Prince Andrew. Mind you, fair play to them on the timing. Nobody will be watching it. And finally, a trans activist, Shanu Varna, a self-professed violent and cruel martial arts champion, signs up to the Women's Institute, even though she's a man, amid a row over policy to allow transgender members. Now, it's simple. He's not a woman. She posted on social media a screenshot of the WI website thanking her for the one-off purchase of the WI Supporter Plus membership and she added this caption: "Fantastic news. For now, she's a Women's Institute member." Although it turns out she had a list of real women that she claimed that she wanted to murder. Shani later went on to claim that the kill list messages were in fact a sting operation. It's been a mucky old week. Right, now, this is what's coming up today. Comedian Mark Dolan will be joining me in the studio for Muck the Week, where we'll be discussing this week's top stories, from Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab's resignation following an inquiry into bullying allegations to sporting events being disrupted by eco-zealots, with many predicting the London Marathon could be next, And Channel 4, of course, set to play a documentary about the controversial Prince Andrew during the King's coronation, and trans activist who's apparently wants to kill a load of women, but it was a sting operation. So after the Muck of the Week, it's time for climate control, and according to new figures, interest in electric cars has sunk as electricity prices surge and the cost of living crisis grips the nation. Then stay tuned at 3:35. I'll be speaking to the naked scientist himself, Chris Smith, and no, he's not naked. This is not Channel 4. American scientists have inched even closer to finding a universal flu vaccine that could last years. He'll be taking us through the science behind the discovery. Then at 3:50, it's this week's Political Spotlight, and I'm pleased to say I'll be joined by Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. He'll be joining me live in the studio to discuss why he got into politics. Then don't forget, at 4, my monologue, I'll be giving you my take on Dominic Raab's resignation and asking you whether you would become a politician. Don't miss anything that's coming up in the next hour. As ever, email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So joining me now is comedian and GB News presenter Mark Doland. Mark.
Nana.
Nice to see you.
So great to be here. So nice to see someone else doing all the hard work.
Is it now?
All the heavy lifting.
Well, you're on the way later.
Yes, we've got a busy show coming up, and actually we'll be talking about the Women's Institute. Well, got to get the plug in. You've so many people watching this show. Is that it?
Right,
Listen, I'm a great self-publicist. Well, we've got so much to talk about, and we will talk about trans women, that's a biological male identifying as female, going into the Women's Institute. The world's gone mad.
I know, hasn't it? I mean, while we're on it, what do you think about it? I mean,
I think it's shocking.
Why is this happening?
I'll be talking later about William Hague, because the former leader of the Tories, former Foreign Secretary, has said that women should get over it. Which is not the right language to use to any lady.
It's some sort of joke, and to me, it's misogyny, right? A load of men telling women what a woman is, or not being able to say what a woman is, which is quite embarrassing, Sir Keir Starmer. And then a load of, I don't know, there's a level of some women who are following this narrative. I don't know whether they're afraid or why they're doing it, but the majority of women find this absolutely abhorrent. I don't understand why it's going on.
Well, definitely. I mean, women, yourself included, have fought for decades, if not centuries, for equal rights, for female-only spaces, for the vote, you name it. All of that is being undone because of this crazy woke movement that many on the left also hate, by the way. It's not exclusive to lefties. It's just this new sort of rather extreme progressive ideology, which basically denies reality and just says that a man is a woman is a man, and that is somehow a fact.
Do you know what? I was reading this thing, and what it is your brain struggles to do that thing, because it's like that game that you play on Nintendo where you see a picture of a horse, but yet the words say cat.
Yeah.
And your brain is doing this mental gymnastics to try and disassociate from what you know is real.
Correct.
And I think I just think it's abhorrent, and I'm not going along with it, frankly, and I know there's a lot of other people that will join me. So anyway, this guy should not be joining the Women's Institute because he's a man. Right, so what do you make of Dominic Raab? I mean, this was such a stitch-up, wasn't it? Come on.
Well, it certainly wouldn't stand up in a court of law because, as you mentioned, these allegations are not within the statute of limitations. So normally if there was a problem in the workplace, HR would have to have an email within 3 months, or ideally straight away. But some of these allegations are up to 4 years old. Raab didn't receive any dates or times, and actually he is a top lawyer, so his letter of resignation was quite scathing about the process by which he's lost his job. The flip side is that politically, I don't think it was possible for Dishy Rishi, to keep him in post. And the reason why is because, in the end, it would be a gift to Labour, which is that you've got an official certified bully in your cabinet, and it will be the gift that kept on giving for Labour.
No, I don't believe so. I think Keir Starmer is the gift that keeps on giving for Labour, and it's not in a good way.
There is one point as well, though, and I think you could argue that perhaps Sunak has been rather cowardly about this, that he's bottled it.
I think so.
Andrea Jenkyns, prominent Tory backbencher, a respected figure within the Conservative Party, said she's disappointed that he's gone and thinks the Prime Minister should have stood up for him. Many of our viewers and listeners, as you know, you can see it on the email, are furious that he's gone because they see this as the civil service flexing their muscles, not serving the will of the British people, because, of course, Raab is very pro-Brexit. He wants to stop the boats. He wants to support Braverman to legally do that, possibly ditching the European Convention on Human Rights. So many see it as politically motivated, but the ability, the ruthlessness of Sunak to actually accept Raab's
Let him go.
resignation, I think proves that he's a good Prime Minister. I'll tell you for why. If Boris Johnson had been better at sacking people whilst he was PM, he'd still be there.
Yeah, but that's not the point.
He didn't sack Matt Hancock, he didn't sack Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, but you only sack people that should go. And if you allow people who should still be there for these pathetic little, oh, I got hurt feelings, he shouted at me. Or there's one where they said, well, what happened was that he thanked everybody, but he didn't thank this one person by name. So they complained. I mean, if the bar is set so low, I agree if someone's done something wrong, but when the bar is set this low, then it cannot be. Yeah. And what do you make, then, of the Extinction Rebellion? I mean, it's embarrassing, that woman, when she was on Jacob Rees-Mogg's show, she was like, he asked her questions, she didn't want to answer anything, and it was all, and then we're going to die, and it's going to be really awful. That's all she did.
Yeah, most of these characters are privileged, they're middle class, they're entitled, they're on a permanent gap year. What they need to do is get a job and get a life. It's a shocking thing, especially seeing the Grand National impacted in the way that it was, which, by the way, was very bad for the horses. And I know that wasn't Extinction Rebellion, that was Animals Rising, but they're all in the same sort of Venn diagram.
What do you mean, the fighting was bad for the horses or the Grand National?
Well, the disruption was... it's been well reported, the disruption to the race was distressing for the horses. Also, the snooker. Now, this is a working-class sport, right? Millions of people in this country love to enjoy what is, of course, an annual event, the World Championships, disrupted, again, by just a very privileged person with luxury beliefs that we're all supposed to pay for. It's complete nonsense. I've got an idea for the Just for All people, which is head to China, pop over to India, right? North Korea, America, Brazil, go to the big polluting countries, start there, and then come back to us when we are, you know, in the doghouse, at the moment responsible for 1% of global carbon emissions.
Well, no, they'd be in jail. They wouldn't be able to come back, or worse still.
Well, every cloud.
Well, that's a good point there, actually. But, you know, they won't do that, would they? Because they're afraid. They're only doing this because they can.
And we're a soft touch.
We are, yeah, we are. What about Prince Andrew, though? He's a
soft touch as well, so I've heard.
Well, his little things can be going out during the coronation, which is probably the best place for it, actually, because no one will watch it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, this guy brought shame and embarrassment on the family whilst the Queen was still with us. It's a problem, a hard nut to crack for the King, how to handle his errant younger brother. But the bottom line is that he's got to essentially step away from the spotlight, give up any idea or dream that he's going to be a top royal, a frontline royal ever again, and have the world's longest retirement.
He's never going to give up. Never, never.
Unless he remarries Sarah Ferguson.
No,
that'd be a great fairy tale, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think so.
I like that. If you think of the royals as like a soap opera, that would be the perfect little twist, wouldn't it?
That'd be pretty.
And then a big old wedding in the Abbey.
Another one,
and he comes back into the fold, all is forgiven.
And Meghan's not coming to the coronation, which I think is a... I didn't want her to come.
Well, I don't know. I think it's another snub, to be honest. So she's been hauling poor old King Charles over the coals about the alleged... The thing is that she's backed away from this allegation, because at first it was racism, wasn't it? But now she's saying unconscious bias, right? So she's clearly thinking that, you know, her original assertion on the Oprah show was potentially libelous, an exaggeration or untrue.
Well, it didn't work, did it?
Well, and it didn't have the desired effect. So now it's just unconscious bias, and she's not had a satisfactory explanation from the King, which is why she's not coming. What a diva. What a drama queen.
She's not coming because she'll get booed. She's not coming because it's embarrassing, because of all the lies that they've told. She's frankly not coming because, well, who would after all that? I mean, how could she even show her face?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like all bullies, she's a coward.
Of course.
And I think she's bottled it. And I think that if she did fly to the UK and came to the coronation, and if she got booed but held her head high, I think the British public would respect that and think, wait a minute, good on her, she's taken the hit. But, of course, she couldn't face it. Her ego is too big.
Well, no, that's it. But Camilla's very good. Camilla took the hit after, you know, she got with Prince Charles.
Exactly right.
That's the way to do it. But then she didn't make this up for herself in this manner like Meghan, so... Oh, well,
not self-inflicted.
Well, I'm glad she's not coming anyway, but I was going to ask you what's coming up in your show, but you've already said it. So
I've given you the whole show. I can't wait, but it won't be nearly as good as this one.
Mark Dolan, what time are you on?
We're on from 9 till 11.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Nana.
See you. Right, well, that was, of course, the fabulous Mark Dolan. Make sure you join him at 9 o'clock here on GB News. Now, of course, we talked about Channel 4's programme. Channel 4, Ian Katz, said this in response. Channel 4 exists to provide viewers with an alternative. So, as the nation is engulfed by pomp, circumstance and forelock tugging, we'll be offering a rather less reverential slate of programmes, including Frankie Boyle's case against the monarchy and the Windsors, Scarborough's satirical take on the coronation. Well, that sounds very enticing. I'm sorry, I could barely read it. I don't know what it's about. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, Director of Car 26, Lois Perry, meteorologist Jim Dale, and former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight, will join me to discuss electric cars and how the interest in them has slumped as electricity prices surge. Then at 3:35, I'll be speaking to the naked scientist himself, Chris Smith. American scientists have apparently inched even closer to finding a universal flu vaccine. So this way it could last for years. Stay tuned to find out more.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I wonder how long they would actually last. Then Judith says, if the allegations made against Dominic Raab are classed as bullying, then heaven help any manager who has shouted or swore at any employee over the years. If an employee now decides that they are bullied. Yes, true, isn't it? If you can go back 2.5, 4 years, I'll see if anyone's upset me. And Jacqueline says, I am not a Raab fan, but our civil service is left-wing, out of control and dangerous, unpatriotic. I hope in Raab they've picked the wrong person and bitten off more than they have bargained for. Yeah, let's hope so. But you think Rishi would like, you know, sort of take off his Prada shoes and sort of get behind him, but no. But right now it's time for Climate Control, discussing the latest on climate change. According to Britain's biggest car online marketplace, Auto Trader, people's interest in electric cars has significantly dropped due to the cost of living crisis and rising electricity costs. Now, the government has also ended grants for those types of vehicles, meaning the cost effectiveness per mile has decreased. And that's as figures show that battery-powered vehicles are more expensive than petrol or diesel, at around about 37%. So will the public make the switch to electric cars, or is the government on a hiding to nothing? I would have thought that's quite obvious. But joining me now is Lois Perry, Director of Car26, Jim Dale, meteorologist, and Angela Knight, CEO of Energy UK. Right, so I'm going to start with Lois, actually, with regard to the old electric car. Now, look, we've been told that the electric cars are a good idea. What's your view of them?
Well, it seems that all the virtue signallers, all of the wokes, all of the people who are fortunate enough to be able to afford to have an electric car for town and a petrol car for the country. I was actually told that by a senior advisor to Alok Sharma recently in Parliament. Oh, won't you just have a electric car for town and a petrol car for the countryside? These are the people actually making the decisions. All the low-hanging fruit has gone. All of the wokes, they've all bought the cars, and everybody else. It's the real world. It doesn't make any sense financially anymore. It's completely ridiculous. The resale, well, there's no resale value because there's no way of telling how well the battery's doing. You know, it's people have woken up. I'm really, really happy about this story, actually.
You know, Angela Knight, is this the right thing to be doing, electric cars? Surely there's better alternatives. There seems to be, they don't seem to last that long, and there seem to be issues.
Well, there are issues. There always have been issues. I mean, whether you start off with lithium for the batteries, where the only refiners are in some pretty nasty parts of the world, through to the actual running costs, which have always been rather more expensive than implied. And I had some friends who went to the Alps to ski with two small children in an electric car in February half-term. Well, it took them more or less they had to plug themselves in about 4 times, and it took them several hours longer than their other friends who drove in an ordinary car. But having said all that, and having said that the economics at the moment are wrong, there's quite a lot of proper work being undertaken by the car industry, both to get different types of batteries, to look at things like hydrogen and cells, in order that we can have something that is a competitive, sensible alternative to petrol and diesel cars. And I'm all up for that. What I don't like is the artificiality of the debate, and I don't like the artificiality of some of the outcomes. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing the research. That doesn't mean that there won't be some sensible alternatives. And that's where I think the work needs to go.
Jim Dale.
Yes, good afternoon. First of all, Nana, congratulations on your new column in the Daily Mail.
Thank you.
I hear.
Thank you.
I'll help you write it one day if you wish. Look, on this particular thing, Lois Flintstone over there. You're getting
Lois, what? Sorry,
I'm afraid. Let me make this absolutely clear. There's only one direction of travel. Yes, technology got us here in terms of the electric car. Technology will improve with time, and it all in any new revolution, any new evolution that we have through the ages. There's always been little hiccups at the start with cost and all the rest of it that goes with it. This is what we're enduring at this moment in time. It isn't wrong, but look, let me make something clear. 30% of cars sold in December in the UK were of electric origin. So there's only one way. It's not a straight line graph, and the cost of living crisis comes into this in terms of expenditure and being able to afford these things. But let's make it absolutely clear: in 10 years, there'll be absolutely no room for petrol cars or diesel cars. Certainly.
Completely disagree with you, Jim.
A minor. Well, you would. That's where you the.
What about the whole diesel revolution?
It's people like yourself, Lois, who would have looked at in the Stone Age times, looked at the round wheel coming and said, "No, I'll go for the."
No, you want us to go back to the Stone Age, Jim.
Let him finish. I want to hear. What did you say about Lois? That it's people like Lois that would have. Sorry.
taken us back to the Stone Age. In other words, being back in the Stone Age, looking at the round wheel as it was invented and saying, no, I'll stick with the old square wheel. That one's a better one. I don't want to move.
Right.
You know, we do get people like this, and that's basically the same with electric cars. One direction only.
Oh, did you hear that? One direction on a square wheel, though. Should have gone for the square wheel.
Well, the irony is obviously completely lost on Jim, that it's the Stone Age that I believe people like him. I'd never say that, funnily enough. That's a little bit rude, but people like you, to use your own phraseology, Jim, I believe, and a lot of people believe, you want to take us back to the Stone Age. I'm not a Luddite at all. But if you have technology that doesn't work and is based on a false premise in the first place, which I believe that it is, with batteries that you have to replace, no resale value, let's be honest. Your Marxist ideology is at the heart of all of this. And, you know, you don't actually want us to be driving. This is about not driving.
Angela, could we not carry on, Angela, but we've got about 30 seconds left. Could we not carry on with our combustion engines, but with zero carbon fuel? Is there such a thing?
Synthetic.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said. The sound.
I said, could we not stick with combustion engines? But is there any sort of zero carbon fuel that we could be using so we don't have to scrap all our old cars? And can we not carry on with what we have?
Well, I think that we can carry on for a bit, but this is not without doing development on other things. I mean, one example which I think has got some more work to be done, but has got some really good long-term possibilities, is the use of natural gas as a fuel, for example, in HGVs. Because we look at the big lorries, and goodness only knows they thunder around our roads like nobody's business, and they're, in the majority, are diesel. Is electric viable for them? Well, it's quite difficult to see that it is terribly viable. What about hydrogen? Yes, there's some possibilities there, and there's quite a lot of work being done on that. But we did at one stage power a number of our bus fleets by natural gas. I have no idea why that went away. Now, natural gas is still, of course, a carbon fuel, but what it does produce is much less emissions. And it's emissions that are the issues here.
Thank you very much, Angela. That's Angela Knight, CEO of Energy UK. Jim Dale, he's a meteorologist. Also Lewis Perry, Director of Car 26. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you so much. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and digital radio. After the break, today marks the 30th anniversary of Stephen Lawrence's murder. Our GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins will be live in Trafalgar Square to commemorate the milestone. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Here's the latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 3:30. The Foreign Office has confirmed the Prime Minister chaired an emergency Cobra meeting this morning as fierce fighting in Sudan enters its second week. The country's army claims foreign nationals, including from the UK, US, France and China, are to be evacuated. Sudan's military says it will help with evacuation plans. The World Health Organization says more than 400 people have been killed and thousands more injured since the violence began. Government forces there are battling with a paramilitary group over control of the capital, Khartoum. The SNP has appointed Stuart MacDonald as the party's new treasurer, following the resignation of MSP Colin Beattie. Mr Beattie stepped down after he was arrested by police investigating SNP finances. He was later released without charge. The party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was also arrested and questioned before being released. Police are investigating the use of £600,000 in donations. A serving member of the British Armed Forces has appeared in court, charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. 36-year-old Thomas Newsom is accused of sharing highly sensitive military information. He's alleged to have shared a 10-page document through social media to 2 senior officers who had clearance and 1 civilian who didn't. Prosecutors claim if the information was leaked, it would have caused a real and immediate threat to British people. He's due in court again on Friday. The family of Stephen Lawrence have held a memorial service in Trafalgar Square to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack while waiting for a bus in southeast London. It's alleged the original investigation was hindered by racism and corruption in the police, meaning it took almost 20 years for two of his killers to face justice. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, said it was a day to celebrate the efforts of the Lawrence family. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Thank you, Bethany. After the break, I'll be speaking to the naked scientist Chris Smith. American scientists have inched even closer to finding a universal flu vaccine that could last many, many years. He'll be taking us through all the science behind that discovery. And then on the way, I'll be speaking to Conservative MP Michael Fabricant on why he got into politics, spilling the beans on his hair. No, sorry, I didn't say that. How he got into Westminster. That's on the way. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Forward from this. Join us.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Well, now today marks the 30th anniversary of the racist murder of Stephen Lawrence, who was stabbed to death whilst waiting for a bus in Eltham in south east London. And this morning, his family held a memorial service at St Martin's in the Fields Church in Trafalgar Square. Let's cross over to Trafalgar Square now and speak to GB News national reporter Paul Hawkins. Paul, talk to me about what's been happening today.
Yeah, so the service finished around 12:30. It lasted for about an hour. It was packed, St Martin in the Fields behind me, with politicians from across the political spectrum, also various organisations campaigning for social justice. There were actors, musicians, celebrities, TV presenters, lots of people from different walks of life, all connected to Stephen Lawrence, his family, the foundation, and the general campaign for social justice and for racial equality. There were speeches as well from the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who paid tribute to Stephen Lawrence and to his family and the foundation. He also spoke afterwards as well, just outside the church behind me. And of course, marking Stephen Lawrence's death 30 years on, it comes just after the latest report, really, the Casey report, which branded the Met Police institutionally racist. In 1999, we had the McPherson report, which followed on from that campaign by Stephen's parents, Neville and Doreen, where the Met was branded institutionally racist. And then we've just had the Casey report, which said that the Met is still institutionally racist, also misogynist as well, and needs really a complete overhaul. That's something that the boss of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, himself has agreed with, although he's disagreed with the term institutionally racist. So a difficult moment for the Met Police today. Some of their representatives were in the church as well. We heard from Sir Keir Starmer as well, the Labour leader. He gave a short speech, plus he read a poem by Maya Angelou, and he contrasted against the very worst side of Britain and said Stephen represented the best. The loss of a life which shone with the lights of a potential, he said. Now, we were standing outside here while the memorial was going on, various people stopping to ask why we were here. We were saying, well, it's a memorial service to mark 30 years since Stephen Lawrence died. Many people, of course, marking, gosh, it's been that long. And David bumped into us. He's down here for the London Marathon, but he also came along to give some flowers to Baroness Lawrence.
Well, I bought a bunch of flowers, which I just felt I wanted to give to Baroness Lawrence, just as a little sort of thought of something, really, you know, just something from the heart. And I was lucky that I managed to catch her just coming out the church, and was able to sort of hand them to her and just said, you know, just want to give you these, you know, in your thoughts and my thoughts of you on your occasion. And she just said thank you. So, and that was it. I just think it was just a tragic occurrence at the time, and you know, to which sort of major occurrences had happened at the time as well. But that one was more than, I think, more than sort of like incredible, because obviously the justice that, or the injustice, you could say, that probably occurred afterwards. You know, and obviously after that, there are instances which are still occurring today, and you know, which you know, I'm sure there's many people like Baroness Lawrence, but because of in the position they're in, you know, I guess it sort of brings it to the media attention, obviously, for who she is, and obviously who her husband is, and you know, and obviously major thoughts for her and her family for today.
So that was David, who was here to give some flowers to Baroness Lawrence. She emerged just a few moments ago, actually, from the cafe, which is part of the church, where there was some refreshments served for some of the guests just afterwards. She said that Stephen's story remained as important and as relevant as ever, and the Stephen Lawrence Foundation, which was only set up 3 years ago to create opportunities for young people, particularly from marginalised background, has said that as part of today and continuing as well, they're going to be trying to encourage more scholarships, research initiatives and pilot career schemes for young people. So that's where they say Stephen's legacy lives on, and of course the Metropolitan Police continuing to go through that process of trying to regain the public's trust and confidence in it as it seeks to eradicate things like racism and misogyny from its ranks.
Well, listen, Paul, thank you very much. That's Paul Hawkins, our GB News national reporter. Thank you so much. Well, following the murder of a public inquiry took place in 1998, led by Sir William Macpherson. Its aim was to investigate the original Metropolitan Police investigation into the death of Stephen. The Macpherson report found that the police investigation was incompetent and that the force itself was institutionally racist. And 20 years after the Macpherson report, Baroness Casey, who was looking into the Metropolitan Police investigation into the murder of Sarah Everard, recently concluded that the force is still institutionally racist. The Metropolitan Police have released a statement from the Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, which says, 30 years on from Stephen Lawrence's murder, this moment prompts us to reflect honesty, honestly on how policing has responded to the necessary calls for change that have punctuated the past 3 decades. While we have made progress, it isn't enough. We have let black communities down, and I and the good majority of our officers are resolved to finally make the Met determinedly anti-racist and anti-discrimination of all kinds. Right, moving on to the next story. Scientists in America are inching closer to a breakthrough in finding a universal flu vaccine that can combat any flu infection. Wow. This jab could also give members of the public protection for a number of years. Now, these viruses are considered to be incredibly intelligent as they're able to continually evolve, which makes them very difficult for humans and our immune system to tackle. And these experts conducted their first clinical trial of this approach in humans. So just how significant is this discovery? I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the naked scientist, Dr. Chris Smith. Chris, thank you very much for joining me. Chris, this sounds almost too good to be true. A vaccine against flu, but nobody can get a vaccine against flu. It's impossible.
Well, we've been searching for many years for a solution to the flu problem, because around the world, every year, about 1 million people die of flu, and they're young and old people, and that's not in a pandemic year, it's just every year. And this is just seasonal flu. And the reason that we have to vaccinate everybody every year who's vulnerable to flu is because the virus changes. It shape-shifts, it evolves, and as it goes around the world, like a baton in a relay race being handed from person to person, the genetic changes that the virus accrues make it look different. And this means that every year, although your immune system may have seen the flu the previous year or seen a vaccine against the previous year's flu, what comes the next year looks a bit different, and as a result, you may not recognize it, so you may catch it. And that's why we have this guessing game of trying to anticipate what will arrive in the opposite hemisphere in their winter based on what's doing the rounds in, say, Australia during our summer, their winter. And we use that to inform what we think will arrive in our shores about 6 months later, and we make a vaccine on that basis. And we have to keep doing this. So what this team in America have done is to say, well, are there any parts of the virus which don't change? That's the first point, and which also are common to all of the different members of the flu virus family, because flu viruses are a really big family of viruses, and they've homed in on some areas of the virus, and they've managed to isolate the genetic code that corresponds to those bits of the virus and turn that into a vaccine that does make you make an immune response against it. In animals, it does produce good, robust, long-lasting protection, not just against any one strain of flu, but all the different strains of flu they tested. And now, what they've announced in the journal Science Translational Medicine this week is that they have put this into a small group of humans to prove, A, it's safe, and to begin to do tests on whether or not it will actually deliver in the same way as it does in animals. But the evidence is it looks good, and they'll now be embarking on the next stage of the research, which is to go into proper efficacy trials where you do this and you ask, does this actually work in humans to prevent flu, not just this year, but for years hence, and against a range of different flu challenges.
You see, now, what you just told me, to me, like, I'm no scientist, but to me it's obvious. I mean, why did they not look, obviously, for things that don't change in the virus to try and work with those things and create a vaccine against that? I mean, you know, to me, as you're describing it, I thought they would do that anyway, but they don't. They're just looking at the mutations of this thing, but not looking at the central thing that doesn't appear to be changing. Why did they not do that before?
The crafty thing here, the virus hides those particular parts of its outer coat from the immune system. It's evolved so that the structure and shape of those bits of the virus means it's very hard for our immune system to see them and respond to them. So this was not just as simple as saying, well, what are the bits that don't change? They had to find those bits, and then they had to find a way to stabilize them and make them express in cells so that the immune system can see that and then make a proper response to it. And so there's a series of different steps that had to be overcome here, and that's why it's taken a long time to do this. And obviously it's early days, it's just phase 1 clinical trials, which is for safety reasons. This is not to prove it actually works, but the evidence is, and I spoke to the team at the Vaccine Research Centre in America who were doing this work earlier in the week, and they assure me that when they do this in experimental animals that respond to flu in a very similar way to humans, it does deliver a really good response.
It's like it's cloaking all the things that you don't doesn't want you to see, so that you can't find out how to catch it and destroy it or stop it from infecting.
Correct.
Which is very, very, very clever that we've managed to get through that sort of barrier. Does that have implications to other diseases or other things that we can't see? That research that they've come through, where they've been able to find the things that have been hidden by this virus?
This is not a strategy unique to flu. Many viruses do this, and they make it very difficult for the immune system to respond to certain bits of their outer coat or parts of the virus that are their Achilles heel. They hide them for good reason. And so the learning that has been advanced for flu here could well translate to other viruses and other infections in general, yes. And certainly the mechanism for how you identify those linchpin virus regions and then get stable forms of them to be made in cells in a dish and produced at really high levels in a format that will turn into a vaccine, that's really good learning, it's really good knowledge, and absolutely it could be extrapolated to other important infections in future.
Right. Fabulous. Well, fingers crossed for that. Chris Smith, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Chris Smith, he's the Naked Scientist. You can check out his podcast. He is fabulous. Right, it's time for my political spotlight. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by a titan of the Conservative Party, Michael Fabricant, who has been the MP for Lichfield since 1982. Michael brought his experience as joint managing director of an international broadcasting electronics and investment group to shake up Westminster. In 2017, he came out as bisexual and has been very open about his relationship. He's also survived a battle with cancer after being diagnosed with prostate and skin cancer back in 2015, but he hasn't let it slow him down. I'm pleased to say that Michael Fabricant joins me now. Michael, nice to see you. Really good to see you.
Lovely to see you again. God, you make me sound like a survivor. The cancer thing was actually incredibly straightforward.
Oh, was it?
We whipped the prostate out. Actually, it turned out that it wasn't yet cancerous, but anyway, it might have gone that way. And the other thing is, well, I just get too much sun, and I have a marvellous lady in Burton-on-Trent who looks at me every 6 months, and if there's anything suspicious, she whips it off. But
oh, yes,
I'm not on any medication and never have been.
Interestingly put. So, Michael, talk to me then, because, you know, that you make light of the idea that the cancer may not have progressed, but it's good that you caught it early, and it's good. The technology that we've moved forward with in science is saving lots of lives. Talk to me about your reason. Why did you get into politics in the first place? What made you do it?
Well, I sort of went to university for years and years and years, and including doing stuff in medicine as well. So very interested in your last interview, which was Chris Smith talking about mRNA vaccines and how they'll be able to identify that sort of common DNA and RNA that exists in viruses, but particularly in flu viruses. But how did I get involved? So I, as you said in your introduction, set up radio and television stations. And it was two things that happened, actually. The first thing was that I was over in Uganda, in Kampala, and we were competing against other countries who were also trying to win this big radio contract there, which was funded by the United Nations. And I could see what the Germans were doing, and I could see what the Americans and other countries were doing, and their embassies were saying, well, if this company gets the contract, we will, give you free education in Germany or America or Japan or whatever. And I went to the British High Commission in Kampala, and I didn't get very far, actually. And the guy I was talking to, really didn't have much of an interest in those days. And when I got back to the UK, I wrote to my MP, and he got me a meeting with the trade minister at that time. And I was talking to him, and he was glazing over, probably like your viewers are now. And I said to him, well, you don't understand anything about export, do you? You're a ruddy barrister. You've never sold anything in your life. And he said, look, because people like you became MPs, then perhaps we would have people, who knew something about business. So that was the first thing that got me interested. But the second reason was that I also was applying for a radio license for a commercial radio station. And the chairman of the group was a guy called Geoffrey Johnson Smith, who was an MP and had been a television presenter back in the 50s and the 60s, long time ago, but great guy. And we used to have political discussions, and he also said, look, you should actually think sometime of becoming an MP. And what happened eventually was that an American company made a bid for my company, And my partner, my business partner, ran a tennis club. He bought a tennis club in Brighton, and I became an MP.
Wow.
Rather an involved sort of explanation, but I hope that makes some sort of sense.
Now you've always been very open about your sexuality, and you've come out as being bisexual. I mean, me personally, I don't care what somebody is. They can do whatever they like. It's none of my business. But for you, has coming out in this way affected your political career at all?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've not made any big announcement about it, but I think a lot of people know that I've been very friendly for 33 years with Andy Street. First of all, when he was a trainee at John Lewis, then he ran John Lewis and Waitrose, and then he ended up being mayor of the West Midlands. And it's quite funny, actually, how the two of us had two very different backgrounds. I was originally from Brighton and worked in radio, and he was originally from Birmingham and worked in retail. And yet now he's at the West Midlands and so am I. And we're both that dreaded word, politician. I hate that. I prefer the Americans who always talk about legislators.
Now, listen, Michael, I've got to ask you. I'm wearing a wig. Are you?
No.
It's not. So, because you told me before that you called it enhancements. You'd undergone enhancements of the follicular area. What does that mean?
It means it's follicularly enhanced.
That's it, yeah. Is it stuck on or? I love it.
Next time you and I meet for a drink, as we occasionally do, I'll let you have a tug.
Really? See if it comes off. Well, I won't let you tug mine. Mine will be straight in.
Of my hair.
I'll jump straight in to get it. So talk to me then. I mean, look, would you, if knowing now what you know now, would you ever have become a politician? You know, obviously we can't talk about political stuff because we're in the midst of purdah, but would you, knowing what you know now, would you have chosen it as a career?
Yes, I enjoy it because I remember a mentor of mine was a Labour MP called Gerald Kaufman. And he said to me, Michael, you can reinvent yourself every parliament and you can do different things. So, you know, for 2 years, I was a shadow trade minister.
Well, we're running out of time. Cracky, it's gone so quickly. Michael, we're out of time. I've got to go. This is GB News. I'll see you soon, Michael. We'll go for a drink.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has chaired an emergency Cobra meeting as fierce fighting in Sudan enters its second week. Government forces are battling with a paramilitary group over control of the capital, Khartoum. Sudan's military claims foreign nationals and diplomats, including those from the UK, US, France and China, are to be evacuated. The World Health Organization says more than 400 people have been killed and thousands injured since the violence began. The SNP has appointed Stuart MacDonald as the party's new treasurer following the resignation of MSP Colin Beattie. Mr Beattie stepped down after he was arrested by police investigating SNP finances. He was later released without charge. The party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was also arrested and questioned before being released. Police are investigating the use of £600,000 in donations meant for the independence referendum. A serving member of the British Armed Forces has appeared in court charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. 36-year-old Thomas Newsome is accused of sharing highly sensitive military information. He's alleged to have shared a 10-page document through social media to 2 senior officers who had clearance and 1 civilian who did not. Prosecutors claim if the information was leaked, it would have caused a real and immediate threat to British people outside of the United Kingdom. He's due in court again on Friday. The family of Stephen Lawrence have held a memorial service in Trafalgar Square to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack while waiting for a bus in southeast London. It's alleged that the original investigation was hindered by racism and police corruption, meaning it took almost 20 years for 2 of his killers to face justice. Mayor of London Sadiq Khan has said it's a day to celebrate the work of the Lawrence family.
We're here today to celebrate and remember Stephen Lawrence's life, his legacy, but also the extraordinary work that's taken place by his family, Doreen Lawrence, by their team, to address the issues of equality, diversity and inclusion.
Labour have condemned Dominic Raab's behaviour since his resignation yesterday as appalling, saying he shouldn't be blaming his accusers for his downfall. The former Deputy Prime Minister resigned after an investigation upheld 2 of the bullying allegations made against him. Mr Raab claims a minority of those within Whitehall are, quote, effectively trying to block government. Shadow Health Minister Andrew Gwynn told us those who've blown the whistle have a right to do so.
why the Prime Minister, who will have known about these allegations, they weren't a secret, sought to appoint him to the second most senior position in government as Deputy Prime Minister, but also why he didn't sack Dominic Raab on receiving this report, why he allowed Dominic Raab to leave on his own terms, and worst of all, doubling down on the whistleblowers, on the victims. I think that letter that Dominic Raab produced in his resignation was quite frankly appalling and showed no humility and no contrition.
The CBI has suspended all policy and membership activity after allegations of rape and sexual assault prompted some of its biggest names to quit. Dozens of members, including John Lewis, NatWest, Jaguar Land Rover and BT, have pulled out of the trade body. The CBI says it shares the shock and revulsion over the allegations. And tributes have poured in for Australian entertainer Barry Humphries, who's died at the age of 89. During a 7-decade career, he was best known for his alter egos, including Dame Edna Everage and Sir Les Patterson. Actor Jason Donovan described him as an entertaining genius, and the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, paid tribute to him as the brightest star in a galaxy of personas. He died in hospital, surrounded by his family. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. So let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Another one bites the dust. Just when it seemed that Rishi Sunak was making headway, he appears to be taking 2 steps back. In allowing Dominic Raab to resign in what looks to me like an attack by a load of woke civil servants hell-bent on his removal, Rishi has shown himself to be weak. Yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab hung up his ministerial boots to languish on the back benches. Why? Because a group of civil servants claimed that he's a bully. The criticisms against him ranged from one person not being named when he praised them all for doing a good job, to saying a civil servant to a civil servant, there's no point sulking about it. Have a listen to some of the allegations against him.
Some officials who had to work with Dominic Raab were offered therapy. Behaviour was described as nasty, horrible and manipulative.
I saw him seething at other senior people, hard staring at you, cold fury. It was pretty sinister. And raising his voice. Lots of it was what I'd describe as microaggressions.
We've had reports of civil servants bursting into tears before and after meetings, civil servants actually being physically sick because of the fear.
Allegations about civil servants being too scared to go into his office. It's even the rather notorious claim that he once got so angry in a meeting that he threw a tomato from a Pret salad at someone.
Oh, for goodness, do your research. That's just not true. He talked about that later on. In fact, the person who claimed that got in trouble. Apparently, one of the complaints was that Dominic wanted questions to be answered directly and in a straightforward manner, and that he interrupted the answers when people went around the houses. Well, if he's guilty, then so am I. I can't stand it when people waffle on about nothing, evading actually answering the question or going on a tangent. They claimed his criticism was unconstructive because he interrupted them. Does that sound like high-level bullying to you? Sounds like a pretty low bar to me. And given that some of the allegations against him happened about 2.5 to over 4 years ago, which would be dismissed in an employment tribunal for being too old, and that they were all brought against him on the same day, it'd be fair to say that there appears to be a level of collusion given the coordinated nature of the filing of the complaints. In an interview with GB News with our very own Olivia Utley, Dominic said this about the process.
Well, look, I think the process and the system of dealing with these complaints was there when he arrived. There was obviously no independent ethics advisor, and I think people would have been very surprised if the first reform he did as he came into government was something along those lines. It would have, I don't think that would have sent the right message, and he had to deal with the rules and the process that were in place.
I mean, why would anyone take the crud that was coming out of those civil servants' mouths seriously? Sounds more like people who have hurty feelings because their poor or inadequate work was pulled up and were now out to get him. He called them activist civil servants.
Most countries would die for public servants that we've got, or a democracy the way that we've got. But there has been a subtle shift over time, and you are seeing more, as I put it, activist civil servants. If you've called for an independent process, which I did, and I've been very clear if there was an adverse finding against me, I resign, I'm not going to then complain about the referee. What I'm just doing is structurally, and I think it's acknowledged by the Prime Minister today, pointing out that the system is flawed.
I mean, seriously, he said the system is flawed. I mean, I feel sorry for him, frankly.
Thank you very much. Just one final question. Did you throw the tomatoes?
Yes, so did he throw the tomatoes? Well, I think we've addressed that. Rob going on in this manner. I mean, seriously, it is quite dangerous, isn't it? This sort of precedent that's been set, unelected activist civil servants can knock on a cabinet minister's door with this crud and oust them from a perfectly decent post. Perhaps they don't like the policies, and worse still, this may have serious implications for the government being able to press ahead with ideas like stopping the boats. I mean, this could mean that activist elements of the civil service, led by unions, could make concerted efforts to bring down government ministers because they disagreed with the government's ideology. I mean, can you imagine this question being asked about the tomatoes? It was ridiculous. We are all in trouble if it is this easy to get rid of our elected politicians. Right, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. First, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be deemed illegal? Health Secretary Steve Barclay is taking legal action against the Royal College of Nursing to try and block the second day of their up-and-coming two-day strike. And that is as the RCN have dubbed the move a blatant threat. At 4:50, it's Royal Roundup, and Royal biographer Angela Levin will be live in the studio to give me all the latest from behind the palace walls. And this week, Buckingham Palace released the last official photograph of the late Queen surrounded by her great-grandchildren to mark what would have been her 97th birthday. Some people are missing. Who are they? And then at 5, it's this week's Difficult Conversation. Today marks the 30th anniversary of Stephen Lawrence's death, with a special memorial taking place to commemorate his life. Then this week, coming up for my Difficult Conversation, Dr. Mark Prince, OBE, will be joining me live in the studio to discuss his very own experience with knife crime. Mark's 15-year-old son was fatally stabbed to death outside his school, attempting to break up a fight. Now, Mark has devoted his life and work to getting knives off our streets. That's all on the way in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panellists, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Dowler. So, what do you think? What do you think? I'm going to start with you, Sam, because you're going to come up with a load of nonsense about Dominic Raab.
Here we go. It's not about Dominic Raab in particular. It's just about workplace bullying in general. I've experienced it. A lot of us have. So many of us have. One of my old bosses came at me with her nails, like, ah! And another one. I've been homophobically abused at work. I've had, somebody come at me with a pair of scissors. But it's just a selection.
Does this sound like anything like that?
No, but however, obviously, bullying in general is subjective. So if somebody feels like they are being being victimised, I know, but the same thing happened with John Bercow, for example, and everyone was like, oh, he's a bully. Just because he's he's a Tory and he's and he's Deputy Prime Minister doesn't mean that he hasn't done it. And just because he appears on television and goes, oh, it's all something else, etc., and trying to whip up some sort of conspiracy theory doesn't mean that it's not real.
So what about the fact that some of the allegations were 4.5 and 2.5 years old? Then all the allegations were presented on the same day together collectively. Yeah. So there was a concerted effort by a group of people to present this thing.
Well, that could well be to do with...
No, but let's see. And also, some of the allegations, like the throwing of tomatoes, proved to be completely rubbish.
But...
was rubbish.
But it's like, for example, when somebody has been accused of sexual misconduct, sometimes people sit on it for a while because they don't want to say anything. They're afraid for their job.
Yeah, but there's a load of lies added to it.
But there is strength in numbers. And at the bottom line, Dominic Raab said that if any of the complaints were upheld and 2 of them were out of 8, then he would resign. So he has resigned, but he's resigned in such a like a gnarly way, like, you know, basically claiming that he's the victim.
Well,
I mean, it's very Trumpian.
But even the findings were such that they didn't really specifically think he was a bully, but they felt he'd have to go anyway. What do you think, Lizzie?
Well, let's be honest, Rob is forthright, Rob is blunt, but Rob, a bully, no, he is not. And this was decided, I'm sorry, by a kangaroo court. And that's being unfair to kangaroos. I know, look, Mr Tolley concluded that Rob had never, in 4.5 years, sworn he'd never physically intimidated anyone nor intentionally sought to belittle anyone. So here we have a brilliant minister that has been brought down by snowflake civil servants. And I'm sorry, as Maggie Thatcher said, advisers are to advise, ministers to decide. And now we have the civil servants ruling the roost. And I think it's a very sad day. You know what I'm upset about? That Rishi didn't stick up for this man who has been by his side, his greatest ally. And the Tories have lost a big beast now, who has now gone to the backbenchers. He was Foreign Secretary, Brexit Secretary, Justice Secretary, twice Deputy, remember, through COVID. And this big experience has now left the government. And Rishi has yet again thrown under the bus to save himself. He should have rolled up his Prada sleeves and fought for him and said, no, you're not going. Because if he sat on this report for 24 hours, he could have seen that this was unjust.
Well, the problem with it as well is that Dominic Raab was in the midst of lots of very important policies. And this sort of cycle of moving deck chairs and people sort of jumping off board to a different bit means that they start again. And then they start tweaking bits that he's done, and this, so nothing gets done. And I'm bored of all this. He said that, she said that, and the fact that it was a load of civil servants, again, who were unelected, by the way, and the civil servants, it wasn't even... Dominic actually said that it wasn't the younger civil servants, because when we say wallflower, we always think it's going to be the younger people.
Or the Gen Zs.
But what he said was actually, it was some of the ones who have been there for a long time, who then brought...
There's obviously a political
to me,
agenda.
Well, exactly. Yeah, OK, but look, bottom line...
agenda. You must admit
Bottom
that.
line is it's the third senior minister that Rishi's lost in 6 months, and I agree with you, Nana, and both of you. Like, you know, this shows weakness on Rishi's part, and like at a time when he's supposed to be building back trust up. Look, here we are. We've lost it again. It's at the front page of every single newspaper, not talking about cost of living crisis, not talking about the NHS, just talking about something else again.
Oh no,
more like house cleaning for the Tories.
It's not on the front of the Star.
Of course.
It's not on the Star.
But you know, this report...
There's got this funny...
What is that, by the way?
There's some sort of weird sort of judge with a... like...
Oh, that is...
judge's rule.
Yeah, well, that's a Terminator, that is.
They've got Terminator.
That's where Sam's brain's gone. It's on front of the Star then. Look.
Give it back!
No, but what was worrying me in this report, because I don't know whether you read this, they had a group complaint.
Yeah.
And there were some people on there that had never even met Dominic Raab. I mean, it is so unfair, you know, and it's a fundamental principle of our justice system, surely, is that you know who your accusers are and when it happened.
But also then you had Gina Miller, who was the anti-Brexit lawyer, who said that he called her a bitch and a lift and stuff.
Apologies for that, by the way.
Oh, excuse me. It's a female dog,
but you weren't using it in that.
No, I wasn't, and nor was he apparently. So I mean, these are, you know, it's when these things build up. Surely there's no smoke without fire.
Yeah, but what's that proven? And I don't agree with that. People can make smoke where there is no fire because of that ridiculous saying right there. It's easy to make someone look bad because then people like you will come out and say there's no smoke without fire. So such people start calling me all sorts of names, even though I've done nothing. You're going to say that, so that means that there must be some truth to it. And
so what is this shadowy government?
It's not the shadowy government. It's the civil service. I mean, look, Mark Sawatska, who is the boss of the PCS, which is the Civil Servants Union, he had said, and I read this in the Telegraph in a piece a couple of months ago, actually last year, that they would have concerted strikes to get rid of the government. So to me, this is a politically motivated move by civil servants to club together to get rid of key figures in the government.
So are they Labour civil servants, then, you think?
No,
who are making policies,
hang
on, sorry, who are making policies that they don't like.
Yes, it's a targeted campaign to get rid of a no-nonsense minister, which Raab was. He's hard-working. He works so hard.
Apart from when he was on holiday.
Apart from when he's on holiday, he doesn't want to come back when he's Afghanistan.
But let's just talk about, you know...
Apart from then, but we can let him off.
I work for an anti-bullying charity. I know, but there's no place for it in anywhere.
So how do you know these people aren't telling the truth?
In a high-pressure job, You know tempers can flare. You know when people there's a deadline that people are impatient for, and need something to happen.
But
I mean, we wouldn't have won the war. Look at Winston Churchill.
Yeah, fine.
Do you think
But it's a different world, and
all these great people would have got where they got without raising their voice.
But being a patron
Margaret Thatcher would be turning in her
being
grave.
a patron of a bullying charity means you should really believe the victims, and for some reason frankly, Dominic has rubbed me up the wrong way for quite a long time.
Because Sam, if I were to thank a group of people and I were to leave one name out, I wouldn't call that bullying.
Yeah, but you don't know the context of it. We weren't there. That is the whole point. None of us were there.
None of them were there, which is why it makes this very easy. And I think we need to be careful when it comes to bullying that people are not using this sort of.
It's
this sort of
belittling.
And I don't believe they should because it stops real bullies from getting done.
Because the person who's being bullied is actually Dominic Raab on this occasion. That's what I think.
Well, the group have got together against him to get him out, and it's worked. And Rishi should have stuck up for him. Rishi, I'm ashamed of you. I really am.
Not for the first time, Lizzie. Eh?
Well, I hope, Rishi, if you're watching, Lizzie is not happy with you and your Prada shoes. She ain't happy at all.
Kick those Pradas off.
Yeah, come on, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, the great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be deemed illegal? Now, the government is set to take the Royal College of Nursing to court and try to block the second day of their up-and-coming two-day strike, and that is as the RCN have dubbed the move a blatant threat. Then at 4:50, it's time for our Royal Roundup. The fabulous Angela Levin will be joining me in the studio live, taking me through all things that are royal. And on the list this week, Buckingham Palace released the last official photograph of the late Queen, surrounded by her great-grandchildren. Hands up who's not there, who's missing? Yeah, I wonder. And that's to mark her 97th birthday. Send me your thoughts as ever. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. I've got a poll up right now asking that very question. Should the nurses' strike be deemed illegal? Cast your vote now, but first let's get some weather.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 24 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget, you can also download the GB News app for free. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, we're discussing Dominic Raab's resignation. Let's see what you've been saying. OK, so regarding Raab's resignation, David says the latest disgusting debacle over Dominic Raab is another stepping stone on the route back to the clutches of the EU. Sunak has signed up the Windsor frame up, I like that, which keeps a quarter of the UK under control of Brussels. The coordinated complaints and the lies which have brought down Dominic Raab were engineered by lefty and EU-worshipping civil servants, supported by communist-led unions. Very concise, thank you for that. Al says, I thought the Tories were going to drain the swamp of these lefty snowflake public servants. A fat chance of that. Jill says the civil service have too much time on their hands, working from home, yes, and doing nothing, or going to the gym or shopping, and no wonder ministers are cracking the whip. Exactly. And, you know, and the worst thing is, what on earth are the Home Office civil servants doing? Processing, what is it, 9 per 1,000 once a week? William says, hi, Nana, our country has caved in to the wokey snowflakes and their ludicrous demands. How can a minority tell the country what is right and what is wrong? And if you don't do your job, you will get pulled up. It's as simple as that. I agree. But, you know, unfortunately, Dominic Raab has gone. Rishi, in my view, is weak. Weak, Rishi. But now it's time for the great British debate this out. And I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be declared illegal? Now, Health Secretary Steve Barclay is taking legal action against the Royal College of Nursing to try and block the second day of their up-and-coming strike, arguing that it falls outside the required 6-month period from when votes are cast in favour of industrial action. Now, Barclay and NHS bosses argue that the RCN's ballot closed at midday on November the 2nd, which, if true, would mean that they would not have a mandate to strike on May the 2nd. That is the final day of the planned walkout. If the court agrees, then the nurses' strike would not be protected by the trade union laws and may therefore be called off. The RCN have responded by saying it would forcefully resist any attempts to get a High Court injunction to block the strike. And its General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has said the legal action is cruel and unacceptable, accusing ministers of punishing the nurses for rejecting the government's latest pay offer. Right, so for the great British debate, I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be declared illegal? Well, joining me now, Henry Bolton, International Secretary, of Border Control expert, Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, Andrew Eborn, a lawyer, and Julia Taylor, a psychiatric nurse. Andrew, I'm going to start with you.
Yes.
What is the legality of striking? Can they strike like this? It's
very, very simple, and there are very strict rules and regulations about what happens about strikes. It can only happen if a majority of union members agree via an organised vote, and basically the strict rules, it must be a postal ballot, and details must be given at least 14 days in advance. And what happens is that particular ballot relates to a time limit, and once that happens, it's 6 months to undertake any action approved by that ballot. And it's very simple. You calculate the number of days. The particular strike ballot action relates to a closed on midday on the 2nd of November 2022, which means that this mandate finished at midnight on the 1st of May. So it's not a question of should it be right and the rights and wrongs of the strike and so on and so forth. That is what the law says. And there is, in fact, an argument that it could go even further, that if the notice is incorrect, which talks about the period from the 30th of April to the 2nd of May, that whole notice could be incorrect. And they can say actually, you can't even do it on the 30th of April or indeed on the 1st of May.
So what happens if they strike anyway?
Well, what happens, it then becomes illegal, and they no longer get the protection that they would have under relevant laws, which means they will be in breach of their contracts and they could be dismissed. They're also, if a relevant injunction is obtained, then they could be in contempt of court and all sorts of things there. It's interesting that Pat Cullen said they would never do anything illegal. So if they do lose the court action, which I suspect would be a very interesting proposition if they didn't, then they would be in all sorts of problems. So I think that's the position. And as I say, it's not about the rights and wrongs of the strike, it's about what the law says.
Julia Taylor, what do you think about this? I mean, they could be breaking the law. If perhaps the strikes are seen as illegal, would you carry on striking or would you go back to work?
Personally, no, I wouldn't.
only because I wouldn't want to be dismissed. I doubt very much.
You wouldn't carry on striking?
I wouldn't personally, because I wouldn't want to be the chance of being dismissed. I do think it's grossly unfair because surely they gave us a pay offer and we said, no, we're not, well, not we, the RCN said, no, we're not going to accept that pay offer. We want more because if we don't get more, we're not going to have any NHS anymore in reality. Surely that should count as we've wanted to strike. Would that not be the case? Should it not be the case? If they do that, I think we'll just have another ballot and we'll strike again, or the RCN rather, will strike again at a different time.
Yeah.
I can't see Pat Cullen actually breaking the law because she won't. I can't imagine she'll do that because we could end up in lots of trouble. There'll be a lot of anger about this, I would imagine, throughout the NHS. Sorry.
What about all the patients? I mean, where are the nurses? I mean, like 35% is a lot to ask. Where are the nurses thinking that the money is going to come from? How do they think genuinely that this is going to happen? I'm going to come to Henry and then I'm going to come back to you, Julie. But Henry, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think this is a matter of law, isn't it? It should at the moment be kept away from politics. On the one side, there is the nurses' position on this, and the National College of Nursing approach in terms of their pay and demands, Royal College of Nursing, their demands in terms of pay and conditions. But this is a legal thing, as Andrew said earlier. It is a simple matter of law as to whether or not this strike that's being called is actually within the time period, and therefore whether it's legal or not. If it's not legal, then I think the leadership of the Royal College of Nursing actually has some answers to provide its membership with, and of course they'll have to abandon the strike unless they want to break the law. But on the other hand, I forget her name, the lady who was just speaking, Julie. I think she's also correct in saying that if that's the case, then they will simply have another ballot and they will strike at another point in time.
Dennis, I'm going to come to Dennis.
There is the moral question as to whether or not that's right or not.
Can I come to Dennis, please? OK, so... No, hang on, wait. With the morality of this, though, I mean...
Well, morality, one thing. Common sense is quite useful for nurses. And common sense is an essential quality that every minister should have. Yes, by one day somebody miscalculated a bit, and if they want to have another ballot, if Steve Barclay really thinks he and Rishi Sunak benefits from a third ballot, and the nurses, I can tell you, because I've been through this myself a lot in the time, will vote even more strongly in favour of another strike.
But
Steve,
but that's a matter of law, isn't it? Look, what the benefit is.
Look, if it's a matter of law, any nurse can take the RCN to court. It doesn't have to be a big bully boy minister like Barclay. You won't even talk to them. You refer to 35%, Henry. That's actually what the junior doctors want.
So it means it's...
I'm so sorry. Yeah. I mean, since 2010, we know that doctors' pay has fallen by 35%.
Yeah, but hold on.
And
no. Listen,
MPs have voted
I'm going to stop there.
32%.
Can we stop there? No. Because, look, Julia, I want to come to you. Do you not... Like, everybody... Like, if I compare what the pay was, say, in 2009, some of the jobs that I would do, I'm even being paid less than I would have been then. Can the nurses not understand that although their wages have slipped down, loads of people... It's a universal thing. And actually, they really need to come to the table and get on with this. Otherwise, there's going to be a backlog and in the end, we're all going to look at the NHS and say, forget it, we're not going to have it that way. I mean, are you not risking the NHS?
No, and I get quite angry when people say that. No offence to you, Nana. But we're striking because we want to save the NHS, because we're not getting the nurses' numbers that we need. Therefore, we're paying private nurses to come in and do the job we're doing. They're getting 3 times more than us, and we're working with them and showing them what to do. There's loads of ways we could get the money. Look at the water companies, the sewage they're spewing out, and they're getting billions and billions in profits. Look at the bankers, we could tax some of them. Why are we paying reparations to other countries for slavery? I mean, it's just absolutely
But isn't
crazy.
this about
the money
patient
isn't
care?
worked out well.
What about the patient? What about the patients?
That's why we're doing
Andrew, what about the patients?
I know you're absolutely right. Under the Trade Union and Labour Relations Act, there's a legal obligation to make sure that the strikes do not endanger life. And I would absolutely beg that question. You have to look at the patient care. Whilst I understand and have some sympathy for people raising about money, and it's across the board. Barristers went out on strike there because crime doesn't pay. You know, the junior barristers, they were earning less than £12,000 in the first 3 years. It's important to shine a spotlight. But Nana makes a great point. You've got to work out where the money is coming from. And we're basically muddling two arguments. One is this legal? The answer is no, it's not, because it's timed out. Work out then about the moral and the other aspects and make sure that complies.
Well, listen, thank you very much, all of you, for joining me. That's Andrew Eborn, he's a lawyer. Julia Taylor, thank you very much, as a psychiatric nurse. Also Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, and Henry Bolton, International Security and Border Control expert. Thank you so much. Well, if you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. After the break, we will continue with our great British debate. And I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be deemed illegal? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also political commentator Sam Dowler. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
(4:35). I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has chaired an emergency Cobra meeting as fierce fighting in Sudan enters its second week. Government forces are battling with a paramilitary group over control of the capital, Khartoum. Sudan's military claims foreign nationals and diplomats, including those from the UK, US, France and China, are to be evacuated. The World Health Organization says more than 400 people have been killed and thousands injured since the violence began. Well, the SNP has appointed Stuart MacDonald as the party's new treasurer following the resignation of MSP Colin Beattie. Mr Beattie stepped down after he was arrested by police investigating SNP finances. He was later released without charge. The party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was also arrested and questioned before being released. Police are investigating the use of £600,000 in donations meant for the independence referendum. Now, a serving member of the British Armed Forces has appeared in court charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. 36-year-old Thomas Newsome is accused of sharing highly sensitive military information, including a 10-page document, through social media. Prosecutors claim if the information was leaked, it would have caused a real and immediate threat to British people outside of the UK. The family of Stephen Lawrence have held a memorial service in Trafalgar Square to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack while waiting for a bus in south-east London. It's alleged that the original investigation was hindered by racism and police corruption, meaning it took almost 20 years for two of his killers to face justice. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Back now to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It's coming up to 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. Coming up at 5 o'clock, this week's difficult conversation. I'll be speaking to Dr. Mark Prince. He's an OBE. He'll be joining me live in the studio to discuss his tragic experience with knife crime. Mark's 15-year-old son was fatally stabbed to death outside his school attempting to break up the fight. Before that, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be deemed illegal? That's on the way.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns. All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Is watching.
Welcome back. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be declared illegal? Now, Health Secretary Steve Barclay is seeking a High Court injunction to try and block the final day of the up-and-coming nurses' strike, arguing that it falls outside the required 6-month period from when votes are cast in favour of industrial action. Now, Barclay and the NHS bosses argue that the Royal College of Nurses ballot closed at midday on November the 2nd, which, if true, would mean that they would not have the mandate to strike on May the 2nd, the final day of the planned walkout. And, of course, if the court agrees, then the nurses' strike would be illegal and may, therefore, need to be called off. Now, the RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has responded by saying that the legal action is cruel and unacceptable, accusing the government of punishing the nurses for rejecting the latest pay offer. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the nurses' strike be declared illegal? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I mean, what do you think? Sam Dowler and Lizzie Cundy joining me. No, you started last time. Don't open your mouth, Lizzie.
Look, we're yes, you did. Look, I think everyone's allowed to voice and strike, apart from, obviously, the army. But, look, I think this is the wrong way to go about it. It's just going to cause more hostility. The government need to get them round the table ASAP. Look, the last offer was rejected. I mean, 46% actually, voted to accept the last deal. They're very close. 2/3 didn't even vote at all. So if you look how close that is, and I just think... They really do. The government now, this is a wrong way to go about it. The nurses don't want to be in court. They probably don't want to, most of them don't want to strike.
All of them.
But they need to get round the table, the government. This is a wrong way to do it.
I agree. I mean, it's almost like
anti their own population, as in, like, you know, you could, like, to, like, the nurses can't strike. And I mean, if this goes through the courts and they are found to not be able to strike, I mean, what is that going to say? And what's that going to look like?
Well, it would say that as a nurse you shouldn't be allowed to strike. I don't think they should be allowed to strike.
Yeah, but also, like, I mean, this is the government who are trying to roll back on human rights as well. I mean, it just looks
Where
like...
are they rolling back on human rights? Sorry,
with the migrant crisis. And
that's not rolling back on human rights.
Suella's trying to get out of the European Court of Human Rights.
Whose rights are you talking about? The rights of the people to have their own space not invaded, or the rights of the people coming across the channel illegally?
Well, this is a moot point at the moment, because
no,
we're
it's
talking
not.
about
You
the
made
nurses.
It. What are you talking about?
I mean, what they're trying to do is roll back human rights so that they can be more cruel.
What about the rights of the patients, though? Do they not have human rights?
Fine. Well, of course, and I do think the patients do, and as I said just now, they do not want to strike. The nurses don't want to strike. The doctors don't want to strike. It's a last resort.
The reason why this is different, they're taking away critical care from cancer units, A&E, intensive care. This is now, the public have always stood by the nurses, and you know, we all applauded them through the COVID. They won't, the sympathy will start to ebb away when we hear about people's loved ones dying, because there will be loss of life, and this is where it is. So the government need to step in ASAP, get round that table.
Get round the table. Why aren't they? Why aren't they getting round the table and talking about it?
Not do this heavy-handed approach, because this will just bring hostility and lack of sympathy. But I'm telling you now, when you hear the stories, and there'll be many of loved ones being lost, loved ones and young children not being supported in intensive care, that sympathy for the nurses will ebb away. I'm telling you.
The blame will land with the government, not with the nurses.
They're taking away the critical care for the first time.
But they're not getting.
Imagine that being one of your loved ones. Imagine you having a serious accident and being left in A&E for 19 hours, not getting seen.
I understand
what about the fact that, look, we all pay through the nose for our national insurance. Everyone's paying for it, right? So we're all paying for this. If they don't want to be NHS nurses, they can join private medical nurses who are being paid twice that. And in fact, this becomes an argument as to whether actually we should be having an NHS and whether it's sustainable in this manner if people are able to strike. If that was a private company and you weren't happy with your wage, you would leave. And so I think that now the actual notion of an NHS set up in this manner is actually flawed. And a lot of people say, oh, but in Australia and in this... Yes, but in Australia, it's not an NHS, it's the privatised kind of cross-pollinated medical system. Exactly. And perhaps, and they're able to offer good jobs and good money, perhaps that's what needs to be happening.
I agree with you. It needs to be restructured. It needs to be completely restructured. And I've agreed with you all the time about this. But I mean, but it just the optics of the government going up against the nurses and trying to stop them even protesting to get some more money. I mean, it just looks terrible. It's classic Tory nasty party, and it just at a time like this, when we are supposed to be loving our NHS and loving our nurses and thanking them for the pandemic, and a year before the general election, it just looks horrendous.
But it's the fault of successive governments, not just this government.
It's been 13 years of this government.
The NHS is a shambolic mess, and you can't say anything. It's like this political football. Now, Keir Starmer's coming out talking about it. What is exactly Keir Starmer going to do? Tell me, because he's using it against the Tory party. Exactly what is he going to do?
Just and you know what?
They need a total reboot. My friend's gone to France. He needs an operation because they can get an operation in 3 weeks. There's over a 15-month wait here. It's madness.
That's why everyone's going to Turkey.
No, but they used to say it's a jewel in the crown, the NHS.
It's not.
It's not.
Listen, everyone's, the nurses don't like the way they're being paid. They don't like the system. It's not working. Then join the private nurses who are being paid 200 quid. Why don't they do that? Why don't they become private nurses, and then we can change the system and actually have a system where people are paying...
The reason why is because they want to help. They want to be part of the NHS. It's the same as with the care sector, for example. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they want to care. They want to care and they want to look after people. Yeah, of course that's why. It's a calling. It's a calling. My partner works in care, and it is a calling. I see it in his eyes and when he talks about the patients that he works with. It is a calling.
The government's last offer, 46% of the members voted to accept it.
Well, that's not over 50%, is it?
54 voted you know, again, they are so close. I just don't think going in heavy-handed like this is going to work or help anyone. The strikes will go on, which we don't want, and loss of life.
Well, listen, I'll tell you what, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, their opportunity to be on the show and talk about the topics we're discussing. Where should we head to? Should we go to Bristol and have a chat with Lee? Lee Harris in Bristol. We haven't seen him for a while.
No.
Lee, I haven't seen him for a whole week, actually, Lee. Lee, look, should it be deemed illegal? And actually, I think the question is, should they really be allowed to strike? I mean, look at the mess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bold move taking them to court, I'm not going to lie, but if you take the moral argument out, you know, as one of your guests said earlier, look at it from a technical point of law, then the government is well within its rights to pursue this course of action, especially if it will save lives, so I hope they succeed. They then might get back around the table. But from a moral point of view, I do believe nurses need a pay rise, and I hope they can get back around the table. But I think this latest move by the Royal College of Nursing is way over the top. You know, I really struggle, Nana, with them using people's lives as bargaining chips. And the RCN Secretary, Pat Cullen, described the Health Secretary's decision to pursue legal action as cruel and unacceptable. Well, I think deliberately putting lives at risk over a dispute about pay is cruel and unacceptable. Hundreds of thousands of operations and appointments have already been cancelled due to strike action. And it's not just the government that disagrees. Labour don't agree either. Wes Streeting said he was deeply worried about nurses withdrawing emergency care during the 48-hour strike, and it was the wrong thing to do. I think we've actually got a bit of unity between the two main parties. You know, they still have public support, I will admit that. But the polls are showing that public support is starting to decline. And if they go ahead with these strikes and people start to suffer and die, they will quickly turn public support against them. I have absolutely no doubt about that. But my view is they have stepped over the line with this latest strike action. It's unnecessary for them to go this extra mile. And genuinely, there are other options available to them. They don't need to do this. I think it's unfair and dangerous.
Yeah, well, a lot of people would agree with you there. I don't get... I understand they're not happy with the pay offer, but in reality, most people's pay has not gone up, and they are not alone. Lee Harris, thank you very much. It's really good to talk to you. He's our great British voice. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Royal Roundup, and royal biographer Angela Levin will be in the studio because, according to reports, the Duchess of Sussex actually penned a letter to King Charles over the worried royal family's unconsciously biased stance. Well, it was racist before, but now it's just sort of like made it...
She wrote that letter.
Well, at 5, then it's this conversation. Now, this week, Dr. Mark Prince, he's an OBE, will be joining me live in the studio to discuss his tragic experience with knife crime. He lost his son when he was just 15 years. He was stabbed to death outside his school trying to break up a fight. That is on the way.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, welcome aboard. If you just joined me, where have you been? This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. The King's coronation is just around the corner, and the royal family has marked the late Queen's 97th birthday. Sarah Ferguson released a heartfelt message thanking her mother-in-law for being a wonderful friend and advisor. And according to the reports, the Duchess of Sussex penned a letter to King Charles over worries that the royal family are unconsciously biased. So each Saturday I love to give you a rundown. Who better to join me than the lovely Angela Levin, royal biographer? Angela, there's so much to get through, isn't
Yes.
there? A lot has happened. Where should we start?
Yeah, shall we start with Meghan?
Let's go with Meghan,
yeah.
why not? The letter.
The letter was sent by Meghan after the then Prince Charles wrote her a letter after Oprah Winfrey's programme. So it's nearly 2 years ago, and it said that she wasn't happy that enough was being done, it sort of disappeared. Nobody knew anything about it. She did say that no one in the royal family had contacted her, so that was number one. That's not right. And then why is it brought out now? It's very extraordinary. I think it's just to get headlines and to leave the sort of feeling that there is still a lot of racism there in the royal family. It's using that word because Harry, when he was interviewed just before his memoirs came out, Spare, he said that there's nonsense. There's no badness in the royal family. There's no racism.
No. He went as far to say, no, the people I know aren't racist.
No. So it's very interesting how, you know, one day you've got something and the next day you haven't got something. And so it's a real shame that it's come up now, and I think there are people other than Meghan who are making it very difficult for the royal family to just get on and have a wonderful coronation.
I think people are actually a bit sick of her now. I mean, I don't think... I think she still obviously rates well on social media and things, but I think people are actually getting a bit bored. I mean, I'm getting a bit bored of this now, even me. I've just had enough of it. And also, I mean, the Queen...
Well, I'm very angry with it, actually. I mean, it's not so much boring, but I think, how can you do that? You know, we're talking about 2 years ago. Your husband said that there was no such racism in the royal family, and yet you come out with this, you know, just 2 weeks before the coronation. Now, that's just spoiling things, isn't it? Said it wasn't, and that was the reason, one of the reasons why she's not coming. Well, why did she come to the Jubilee celebration? I mean, it's all a mess, and it just annoys me.
It's not true. She's not coming because she'll be embarrassed, because people will boo her and she doesn't want to be booed.
She doesn't want
to be booed. She has to find a reason, therefore it doesn't look like it's her
fault. But it's so arrogant as well.
Well,
you know, I'm not satisfied with the way it's been responded to. You know, she's talking to the King of England.
I think she's got nothing else to do, nothing else to sell, and they're trying to find something, make something up. I mean, in the picture of the Queen's 97th birthday, what would have been her 97th, those were her grandchildren, and because of the way they've behaved, obviously Meghan's children were absent from that picture.
Well, they're absent because it was all done in Balmoral, and they were invited to Balmoral.
But they didn't come.
And they didn't come.
No,
so
exactly.
You can't do a picture if people aren't there. I mean, that's also nonsense sort of thing. But let's do something nice.
Yes.
And that is Fergie. who was saying the other day that she feels not at all upset that she's not being invited to the coronation because she's divorced and there's not a lot of people there and it's a state event, not a private event. And the programme she was on, she was being pushed because they really wanted her to be angry about it. But she wasn't. She was very charming. She was very nice. She said she got on very, very well. They said, do you get on well with Charles? And she said, you mean King Charles? You know, she was quite firm about that. And she said yes, and also very, very well with Camilla. And I had a wonderful time at Christmas there. They invited me for Christmas. It was the first time in 30 years. So she sort of made it that she's not going to make a fuss. She's quite happy. And she did say quite cunningly that I think the main thing is that the family work together. We've got to be together, which I thought was a little dig at Harry and Meghan.
Yes, she did say that, didn't she? I remember that, but I thought, yeah. So what else have we got going on? Anything else?
Well, yes, I think Tom Parker Bowles did very well this week. I mean, he's Camilla's son, who's a chef, professional chef, and writes on food. And he actually sort of said that he felt very strongly that he doesn't think of his mother as the Queen. He thinks of his mother as his mother because that's what she's like and he loves her. And he said that she didn't marry because she wanted to be the Queen. She married because she's been in love with King Charles for a very long time. And it's not been a plan of hers. And she hasn't worked out how she was going to get this. And I thought that was a very kind way of actually supporting his mother, slapping Prince Harry on the hand and saying, don't you dare say that about my mother, and actually supporting her in a very strong way. And I thought it was charming, actually, because he's of an age where he decides whether he wants to do these things or not. And he did, and that saves his mother actually trying to justify herself in any way, which she obviously doesn't need to.
Well, I mean, I'm getting very excited for the coronation, Angela, and of course, hopefully you're joining us at Buckingham Palace and coming.
So do I.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
I hope I'm getting myself ready. A couple of weeks now, just 2 weeks.
Yes. What wearing is the interesting thing. Have I got to wear red, bright and blue somehow? I'm not sure.
I'm going to have to start shopping. Angela Levin, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you as ever.
OK.
Fascinating stuff. That is royal biographer Angela Levin. This is GB News. Stay tuned. I'm Nana Akua. There's loads more to come in the next hour. Good afternoon, welcome on board. If you just tuned in, where have you been? This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. And today marks the 30th anniversary of Stephen Lawrence's death. Dr. Mark Prince will be live to talk to me about his personal experience with knife crime. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him on the behind? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has chaired an emergency Cobra meeting as fierce fighting in Sudan enters its second week. The government forces are battling with a paramilitary group over control of the capital, Khartoum. Sudan's military claims foreign nationals and diplomats, including those from the UK, US, France and China, are to be evacuated. The World Health Organization says more than 400 people have been killed and thousands injured since the violence began. Stuart MacDonald has been appointed as the SNP's new treasurer following the resignation of MSP Colin Beattie. Mr Beattie stepped down after he was arrested by police investigating the use of £600,000 in donations meant for the independence referendum. The party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was also arrested and questioned. Both were released without charge. A serving member of the British Armed Forces has appeared in court charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. 36-year-old Thomas Newsome is accused of sharing highly sensitive military information. He's alleged to have shared a 10-page document through social media to 2 senior officers who had clearance and 1 civilian who didn't. Prosecutors claim if the information was leaked, it would have caused a real and immediate threat to British people outside of the UK. He's due in court again on Friday. The family of Stephen Lawrence have held a memorial service in Trafalgar Square to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack while waiting for a bus in south-east London. It's alleged that the original investigation was hindered by racism and police corruption, meaning it took almost 20 years for two of his killers to face justice. Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said it's a day to celebrate the work of the Lawrence family.
We're here today to celebrate and remember Stephen Lawrence's life, his legacy, but also the extraordinary work that's taken place by his family, Doreen Lawrence, by their team, to address the issues of equality, diversity and inclusion.
Labour have condemned Dominic Raab's behaviour since his resignation yesterday, calling it appalling and saying he shouldn't be blaming his accusers for his downfall. The former Deputy Prime Minister resigned after an investigation upheld two of the bullying allegations that have been made against him. Mr Raab claims a minority of those within Whitehall are, quote, effectively trying to block the government. Shadow Health Minister Andrew Gwynn told us those who've blown the whistle do have a right to do so.
Why the Prime Minister, who will have known about these allegations, they weren't a secret, sought to appoint him to the second most senior position in government as Deputy Prime Minister, but also why he didn't sack Dominic Raab on receiving this report, why he allowed Dominic Raab to leave on his own terms, and worst of all, doubling down on the whistleblowers, on the victims. I think that letter that Dominic Raab produced in his resignation was quite frankly appalling and showed no humility and no contrition.
The CBI has suspended all policy and membership activity after allegations of rape and sexual assault prompted some of its biggest names to quit. Dozens of members, including John Lewis, NatWest, Jaguar Land Rover and BT, have pulled out of the trade body. The CBI says it shares the shock and revulsion over the allegations. Tributes have poured in for Australian entertainer Barry Humphries, who's died at the age of 89. During a 7-decade career, he was best known for his alter egos, including Dame Edna Everage and Sir Les Patterson. Actor Jason Donovan described him as an entertaining genius, and the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, paid tribute to him as the brightest star in a galaxy of personas. He died in hospital surrounded by his family. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, so let's get back to Nana.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. Welcome on board if you've just joined me. It's coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also political commentator Sam Dowler. Still to come, it's this week's difficult conversation. Now today marks the 30th anniversary of Stephen Lawrence's death, with a special memorial that's taking place to commemorate his life. And this week, Dr. Mark Prince, OBE, will be joining me in the studio to discuss his very own experience with knife crime. Mark's 15-year-old son was fatally stabbed to death outside his school attempting to break up a fight. And now he's devoted his life to working to getting knives off our street. Then on the way, it's our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him back? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of hypocrisy after it emerged that he opposed the deportation of child rapists who is still living in the UK. And this comes weeks after he launched an attack campaign against Rishi Sunak's stance on child sex abusers. So has his hypocrisy damned him? Send me your thoughts at gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. So now it's time for this week's difficult conversation. Now today marks the 30th anniversary of the racially motivated murder of Stephen Lawrence, who was stabbed to death whilst he's waiting for a bus in Eltham in south-east London. And this morning his family held a memorial service at St Martin in the Fields Church in Trafalgar Square in London. Dr. Mark Prince knows only too well the the impact of losing a loved one to knife crime. He lost his 16-year-old son, Kyan, a talented QPR player, in a knife attack outside a school in 2006, where he was trying to break up a fight. Back in 2021, FIFA used deep fake technology to bring the young footballer back to life. Now, when his father saw the imagery, he was reduced to tears. Mark has since launched the Kyan Prince Foundation in his memory, raising awareness about knife crime and how it can tear families apart. And the most recent facts about knife crime in the UK make for alarming reading. There has been a 10% increase in knife crime in England and Wales from last year. And since last year, there have been 45,000 offences involving a knife or a sharp instrument. And since 2010 and 2011, there have been a 34% increase in offences using knives or sharp instruments, and knives and sharp instruments are used in 40% of homicides. West Midlands has the highest rate of knife crime. That's 152 offences per 100,000. And in the year 2021 to 2022, 19,500 sentences were handed down for possession of a knife. Juveniles made up 20% of those 19,500 sentences. Mark now works with children and young people using the sport of boxing to inspire and set them on the right path in life. And I'm very pleased to say that founder of the Kyan Prince Foundation, Dr. Mark Prince, is here to join me now. Mark, thank you very much for joining me. It's really good to meet you, good to talk to you.
Yeah,
but it's so tragic. I mean, we were saying earlier that there's so much knife crime and it's getting worse. And I know a lot of it is by black youths as well. We can't get away from that fact. Talk to me about Kyan. I mean, what kind of boy was he? Was he somebody who would be involved in anything to do with weapons and knives?
You know, Kyan's the last person to be involved in weapons or knives. Kyan was all about a mindset of success and becoming great. He watched his dad as a successful #1 light heavyweight in the country growing up. And I was his hero, as he shared with his mum. I was his inspiration. And that example, showed in Kyan. So whether it was already in his bloodstream and, he just got onto football and loved it, but what else was lovely about him was the way that he treated people. This was really special about Kyan. But then again, we brought Kyan up to understand that he comes from a great creator that has made him. He's brought value to this earth. He's been made with purpose. He has an identity, but he must add value by the way he treats people. So his mum would instill that love, value in him. I would instill that love value in him. So what would Kyan do? After he passed, I heard so many stories of kindness and care and leadership qualities from Kyan, whether he was playing in a football team on Sunday with a bunch of guys and a fight would break out, or whether he was at school and somebody was bullying a year 7 and he would cut in and stop that bullying and tell the guys, nah, don't pick on him. Just don't treat people like this. So you could see that he takes on how he was brought up to be as an individual.
What a fabulous young man he sounds. I mean, he
100%.
must be. So what happened? How did he get involved in this?
Kyan was just leaving school and there was a fight, and obviously most kids fight, and they encourage it. But Kyan didn't want to see people fighting each other, so just tried to break it up, peaceably break it up, and the guy just pulled the knife out. The guy pulled the knife out. He was a year above him. Kyan was 15 at the time. The guy was 16. And Kyan said to him, "But put that away, man. What are you doing with that? Put it away." And then went to walk off, and the guy came after him. Literally, the kid said he kind of just jumped on him and started the stabbing motions. So Kyan, obviously, in his world, he's not expecting somebody to stab him. He's a popular guy. He's not doing anything worthy of getting stabbed. Not that there is something you can do worthy of being stabbed, but that situation didn't cause for that. But what it shows is that there were red flags, because that individual, they found out during the court case, it was brought up, I found out that he'd urinated in front of a teacher at school. God. He'd threatened a girl on the bus to stab her, shank her on the bus for, opening a window on the bus when he didn't want it open. So there were red flags. And we have to start looking at underlying issues with young people. What's going on in their lives, what's happening with them. And he's come from a war-torn country. We don't know what he's seen in Somalia.
So he was not from this country?
No, yeah, he was, Hanad was from, gosh, how could I even...
Yeah. Just not Eritrea or something like that? Or?
No.
What does it begin with?
It's,
Sudan?
oh gosh.
Give me a letter.
Why has it gone from... lots of them are coming in. Oh gosh, how could I forget where he's...
Well, don't worry, it'll come back
from, yeah.
Carry on.
It'll come back in my head.
Come back to you.
Yeah.
So this kid, there was already kind of red flags for this kid.
Yeah, there was.
And the agencies that should be kind of sort of keeping an eye on safeguarding children like this, keeping an eye on them, doesn't sound like there was much going on. So when...
It's missed sometimes at school. Because at school, all they do is give out detentions and whatnot, and it doesn't actually tackle the issue, and school doesn't look to look at the underlying issues. That's why there's this route from school and into prison. And, expulsions are on the rise, and then you'll find that a lot of those same kids end up going to jail.
So I think maybe it was that he was Somalian, was it?
That's correct. That's the word I was looking for. I don't know why it didn't.
So what happened then? So people knew who he was. They knew who stabbed Kyan.
My daughter knew him. He was a friend of my daughter.
This guy was a friend of your daughter?
It totally messed my daughter up. Tanisa really messed her up. Because how do you get your head around that? First you hear your brother's been stabbed, and then you hear it's from a guy in the age above, in a year group above your brother, and you know him.
Did he know that he would shoot?
100%. But what she didn't know is that there were jealous aspects about that Hanad had for Kyan, because in the police station he talked like really strange comments. How can this guy be so wham, which is like well built for his age? How could he, how could he be so good at football? How could he be so good at basketball? He's younger than me, so he was jealous. And then I heard that, there was a girl he liked and she liked Kyan. So there was lots of things.
There may have been some other things
going on that was in his mind.
He's obviously not here to talk about.
Kyan's not aware of.
But so this guy who was he was arrested. Is he in prison? He's in prison now.
He's in prison now. He just had. They went for his first parole last year, and obviously they wanted a comment from me because I've actually tried to go in on a visit as well so I could get to meet and talk with him. Yeah, it's been a tough process. Everything I've done has been a process of really difficult things, going into schools, going into PRUs, going into the community, talking to young people, running going into yachts, youth offending teams, talking to guys who are on the youth offending for carrying knives, for stabbing people, for, ruining families.
Was this an eye-opener?
Going into prisons.
Was this an eye-opener for you? Because obviously when you heard about what had happened to your son, I mean, you must have been devastated, right?
Well, imagine I'm working in the system already helping those young people.
So that's what you were doing?
That's what I was doing. From 2002, I trained to be a life coach. My career abruptly ended in 2000 with my knee getting ruptured, and then I went into counselling, youth work, and done all what I needed to educate myself, and then began to work with young people. I used to bring Kyan with me so he could see how privileged he was to have his dad when a lot of young boys didn't have a father figure and hadn't been given the same examples. He made great friends. We took him out canoeing.
So cute.
Yeah, really, really, really awesome guy.
You must have been so devastated.
Listen, there's no way I can begin to take people on the journey that I went through and his mum went through afterwards to try and get them to understand the pain and to understand how this can happen to anyone. That's what hit me, how this can happen to anyone. I used to watch news about serious youth violence on the telly and other people, families, their children being stabbed and feeling so hurt for them. Not in all my worst nightmares could I imagine you're going to be one of those families next, Prince. Did I not think that? So I want people to understand, don't sit back and think this is one demographic problem.
No.
Because whatever era you go in, if they're predominantly black, it's going to be predominantly black having that issue. If it's predominantly white, it's going to be predominantly... If it's predominantly Asian, you're going to have there's Asian gangs, there's, Liverpool gangs, there's Birmingham. They're all over the place. But it's a mindset issue.
It is a mindset, I agree with you. But it's annoying for me, obviously, being a black woman, to see a lot of this is perpetrated by black individuals. And I think to myself, stop. Why are they doing this to themselves? Stop killing each other. And the thing is, people say, oh, it's terrible, but somebody who's black is more likely to be killed by somebody who's black. That's the thing. When people say, oh, it's terrible, there's racial this and that, it's like, well, can't you see what you're doing within your own, within your own section of people who are like you, who look like you? They may not think like you, but they may look like you.
Self-hate.
It's so easy for people to then bag them up as black
lack
people.
Lack of identity. It's the same issues when you look at it. It's about the mind. We can take a knife out the hand, but we need to get it out of the mindset. So the mindsets change and people begin to look at another human life with value.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's what it is. It's about respecting that. And I think one of the things is understanding that you do not have the authority to take life. You do not give life. There is a higher power than yourself, and it was healthy for us to grow up and understand that there is a God Almighty who's created all of this and created you with purpose, and taking that out of the education schools.
I'm so glad you said that. I believe, now listen, I'm not somebody who's deeply religious. I was at one point. But when they took religious education out of the curriculum, like a general standard of moral code that everyone kind of followed, there became a shift in the narrative. And I'm not saying that people should be all God-bothery and things like that.
But we don't want to mention that.
But no, because people think, oh, you're just being a bit weird. But I remember I remember as a young person hearing, oh, they've taken religion out of the curriculum and thinking, oh, my God, how will people know what's right and wrong? Because that's kind of how I learned the moral code. I'm not saying you should follow one religion or another, but I'm saying that the moral code within the Bible and things like that actually give people a guide and structure, especially for young people. You don't have to be a religious person, but just have this sort of guide.
Have some guidance and understand that there's a manufacturer's handbook for everything that's created and made. There's a manufacturer's handbook for you to resort to go and check how you're supposed to treat this product, keep it safe. There's a way that how we're supposed to treat each other and keep each other safe and keep each other well cared for, and that's all lost.
It's gone, isn't it?
So you're seeing young people running around, waving knives, swords around on the streets.
Crazy.
And it's shocking. People don't know the real levels of this. Some of the stuff my son will show me on his phone and what's going around on Snapchat and TikTok and all of that. And, imagine growing up and that's the norm for you.
You know what? When they say you've dodged a bullet, in the sense you have, that you're now older, you're beyond it. But as you said, you're now the parent who will then have to be the person.
We ain't dodged anything, have we?
You haven't, because it's the pain will be yours.
So if we go on to parents now, we haven't dodged anything. Because a lot of our generation need to look at how we looked at things and what we wanted to change. Oh, we were beaten. Oh, we wasn't treated right. And we need to make sure our kids have everything we didn't have. When in fact, you could have spoilt your youth. You could have made your young person feel privileged. You could have softened them to the point where they have no moral guidelines and structure. You didn't make sure that they learned about God because your parents made you go to church, so I'm not going to let them go. So there's so many different areas to look at.
Talk to me briefly then about your charity, because we're running out of time and I want to hear about it and how people can support it.
100%.
How can they do that?
Because that's what this is all about.
How can we
So the Kind Prince Foundation, I think in people's mindsets, because we've done so great and we've been in the media with doing the Long Live the Prince campaign. It hit 1.4 billion people across the world. We got the stadium renamed Kind Prince Foundation. All these magnificent things that's happened, people have thought that Kind Prince Foundation, we made it, we've got the money, we've got everything, but our media attention and what we've achieved hasn't lined up with the financial backing that we deserve. So we've done everything. All the work that we've done has been on a shoestring budget.
So if people can help or they want to get
20 grand little
have you got
funding
a website?
here.
Have you got a website?
www.thekpf.com. We really need people to give. Why? Because there's a very special anniversary event happening on the 20th of May. What we've realised is because people think that the money's there, we need to make sure that people understand we don't have the money.
So
we've been working and giving our life
people can support you
to
because
this.
we've got about 20 seconds.
Okay, good.
Give me the website again where people can go if they want to
20th
support.
of May, we need you to buy tickets at Queen's Park Rangers box office. There's a ticket link, the box office link. Buy the tickets for this event. We've got lots of talent and stars. Harry Redknapp, Marlon, David Harewood. We've got so many people. Can't remember all the names, but there's lots and lots. Anton Ferdinand, loads of guys. All supporting this event to raise money so we can build the Future Champions Centre, because we want to be able to show the model we've been using all these years that's been changing lives to actually change lives now. Let's make this happen, but we can't do it without the people.
Well, the people...
Buy the tickets and donate.
Let's try and help our young people stop this scourge of knife crime. Dr. Mark Prince, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Of course, the founder of the Cayenne Prince Foundation. That was difficult conversations on the way. The Great British Debate this out, I'm asking. Will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign bite him back? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of hypocrisy after it emerged that he opposed the deportation of child rapists just weeks after he claimed Rishi Sunak did not believe that child sex abusers should go to prison. Stay tuned, it's on the way next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time now for a great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him back? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of hypocrisy after it emerged he opposed the deportation of a child rapist just weeks after he claimed that Rishi Sunak did not believe child sex abusers should go to prison. See, that's the problem, isn't it? When you start trying to pick holes in other people, we can start looking at holes in you. Fabian Henry was due to be deported to Jamaica in 2020 after being jailed for twice attacking a 17-year-old girl and abducting and raping a girl of 15. Well, the Daily Mail reported that Starmer had endorsed a letter opposing Henry's and 41 other criminals' deportation to Jamaica. Labour have sought to defend Starmer by saying that whilst he may have opposed Henry's deportation, he was not part of the process that allowed Henry to stay in the UK, which isn't really an argument because Rishi Sunak isn't part of the process that deals with child abusers at all. Nevertheless, it is not a good look for Starmer, who has sought to use his time as Director of Public Prosecution to paint himself as being tough on crime. So, the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him back? So joining me to discuss that, Belinda Lucy, political commentator and former Brexit MEP, Anna McGovern, political commentator, and Sir Vince Cable, former Liberal Democrat leader, and Sam Dowler, political commentator. I'm going to start with you, Vince Cable. What's your thoughts on this campaign, first of all?
Well, it wasn't very smart. And I think it will rebound. I mean, the whole point about attack campaigning is that it's got to have an element of truth. And the idea that Sunak was personally favouring treatment of sex offenders clearly makes no sense, and I don't think anybody would believe it. I mean, if you're going to have a personal campaign, and, you know, unfortunately that's the way politics often is, concentrate on something relevant. I mean, there clearly is a public mood that Sunak is an extremely rich man who may be out of touch, his wife's tax affairs, his swimming pool, and so on. I mean, if they were going to attack him personally, that's what they should be doing. But this particular one is very misguided. I think it's... most people don't have a clear view of Mr. Starmer, and I think this rather undermines his credibility, and it was a bad move.
Very bad move. Belinda Lucy, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Keir Starmer is throwing stones from a very, very thin glass house at the moment. And I think his actions speak much louder than his words. You know, he's a political chameleon. He changes with the wind and says things just because he thinks that's what people want to hear. But let's look at his actions. He campaigned to stop the deportation of 50 criminals, one including this rapist who attacked a 17-year-old girl, as you said, twice and abducted a 15-year-old. Now, he is putting the human rights of a rapist above the victims, public safety. What does this say about him? It's a real insight, a worrying insight as to what we can expect if he becomes Prime Minister.
Well, of course, Belinda, just to stop you there briefly...
He's Mr. Softy for a reason.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were 41, actually, and he signed a letter, so it wasn't really a campaign. But yes, he did. He was supporting it in some respects. Sam Dowler.
I mean, I agree with you, Nana. Like, he wasn't campaigning, and as his job of Director of Public Prosecution, like, you know, his record speaks for itself. I mean, I've said on record that I don't agree with and I agree with Vince there that I think it was misguided. And also you've got to look at your own house before you start pointing fingers at other people. And I think it was a bit of a foolish move when there is a wealth of other things that they could have attacked Rishi Sunak for. As for Keir Starmer himself, I think, you know, he's a stand-up guy. I think, like, you know, he did a fantastic job in his past roles. I think, you know, he is maybe a safe pair of hands that people are looking for outside of the chaos of the Tory party. So, we're going to get so much more of this as the general election approaches, and I think you know, like this particular ad campaign probably should be and will be forgotten.
Well, but everyone's painted him, and he's painted himself as somebody with integrity and everything else like that. If he carries on like that, Anna McGovern, what do you think? I mean, it sounds to me like this is foolish, but what is your view?
No, absolutely, and it demonstrates exactly that he does lack integrity, as does the Labour Party. And, you know, especially the Labour ad attack campaign on the Conservatives, they were doing exactly what they would be criticising the Conservatives of doing. And I think it demonstrates as well that this general election coming up is going to be one on pretty much a culture war and what is to be said that's the right thing at the time. And I think for Keir Starmer, it just demonstrates again that he's a complete hypocrite, and he'll chameleonize himself to sort of please just say the right thing rather than actually what he believes.
Well, Vince, do you think this will actually affect his poll lead? Do you think this is something that actually is quite significant?
I doubt at the moment that many people are aware of this campaign. I mean, it's a local government election. People don't take political advertising terribly seriously. And I only heard about it in the newspaper. I didn't see it, I think, like many others. So I suspect it will have passed most people by. But I think why it's important is that it sets the tone for what is going to be a year, 18-month election campaign. I mean, the Labour Party currently are in the lead. Starmer's reputation, such as it is pretty good. And I don't think they help themselves by going down this particular road, and they've got time to change it.
Belinda.
I'm actually grateful to Keir, in a way, for highlighting the Conservative record on law and order. I mean, it has been appalling. Less than 7% of burglaries end up with the offender being charged. 5% for theft. 1% of car theft ends up with the offender being charged. It's not a great record for the Tories. So thank you, Keir, for that. He's doing what an opposition should do, but it has spun the spotlight directly on him, and I don't see any evidence of him being tough on law and order or crime in his past career. So I think as long as the Tories are doing badly, Keir has a chance to gain the keys to Westminster, but it does depend on the Tories. I don't think people will be voting for Labour because they trust them to be tough on law and order as much as just not voting for the Tories because they don't seem to be any good either.
Well,
as they're plagued on both their houses, Nana.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much to Vince Cable. Thank you for joining me, former Liberal Democrat leader, Anna McGovern, political commentator, Belinda DeLucy, political commentator, and former Brexit Party MEP, and Sam Dowler, political commentator. Thank you for your thoughts on that one. So what do you think, then? If you just tuned in, welcome. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him in the back? We'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also political commentator Sam Dowler. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
(34:05). I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has chaired an emergency Cobra meeting as fierce fighting in Sudan enters its second week. Government forces are battling with a paramilitary group over control of the capital, Khartoum. Sudan's military claims foreign nationals and diplomats, including those from the UK, US, France and China, are to be evacuated. The World Health Organization says more than 400 people have been killed and thousands injured since the violence began. Stuart MacDonald has been appointed as the SNP's new treasurer. It follows the resignation of MSP Colin Beattie, who was arrested by police investigating the use of £600,000 in donations meant for the independence referendum. The party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, who is also Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was also arrested and questioned. Both were released without charge. A serving member of the British Armed Forces has appeared in court charged with offences under the Official Secrets Act. 36-year-old Thomas Newsome is accused of sharing highly sensitive military information, including a 10-page document through social media. Prosecutors claim if the info was leaked, it would have caused a real and immediate threat to British people outside of the UK. The family of Stephen Lawrence have held a memorial service in Trafalgar Square to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack while waiting for a bus in south-east London. It's alleged the original investigation was hindered by racism and police corruption, meaning it took almost 20 years for two of his killers to face justice. We're on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Back now to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It's coming up to 37 minutes after 5 o'clock. On the way, Barry Humphries, also known as Dame Edna Everage, has passed away today at aged 89 after being hospitalised with complications. Broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, who met Barry while sharing some of the special moments she shared with him, will be discussing all of that. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 40 minutes after 5 o'clock. Now it's time for our great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him back? Now, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of hypocrisy after it emerged that he opposed the deportation of child rapists just a week after he claimed that Rishi Sunak did not believe child sex abusers should go to prison. Fabian Henry was due to be deported in Jamaica in 2020 after being jailed for twice attacking, once for attacking a 17-year-old girl and abducting and raping a 15-year-old. But the Daily Mail reported that Starmer had endorsed a letter opposing Henry's 41 other criminals' deportation to Jamaica. Labour have sought to defend Starmer by saying that whilst he may have opposed Henry's deportation, he was not part of the process that allowed Henry to stay in the UK. How can he even think that that's a justification? It doesn't work like that. Nevertheless, it is not a good look for Starmer, who has sought to use his time as Director Public of Prosecutors to paint himself as being tough on crime. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, will Sir Keir Starmer's attack campaign come to bite him back? Let's see what my panel make of that. I've got broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Lizzie Cundy, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's going to come and bite Starmer right on the derriere. Great Sir Softy Starmer. He's as transparent as a fish in a glass bowl, and sadly the fish has got more personality than him. But listen, he stands for nothing. He gives no detail. He gives no substance. And there he is attacking Rishi on their those adverts, which I thought was absolutely disgusting, saying that Rishi thinks sex offenders shouldn't go to prison. I mean, number one, that is a lie. And it's bullying tactics, and it's so wrong. He's a hypocrite. He's got no substance, no policy, and no personality.
But Lizzie, he
doesn't know what a woman is.
Well, he doesn't.
No, but he doesn't.
But it also seems like he's pretty stupid. And I don't mean to be rude, but that is pretty stupid. Why would you throw one giant rock at somebody else's whilst sitting in a big glass house yourself? I mean, he complained about Boris Johnson when Boris Johnson pointed out the whole Jimmy Savile debacle, of which he was head of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Clearly, he wouldn't have had direct involvement. And now he's had a go at Rishi Sunak, saying that Rishi Sunak doesn't want to put child abusers in prison, but knowing full well that Rishi Sunak has no direct contact or no direct influence with the Director of Public Prosecutions and any of the prosecutions that happen there. It is down to the judges. So I don't understand where in his brain he thought, I'm going to use that, they're not going to find me out. And then it turns out that he's intervened in something in a term for signing something that allows somebody who is a criminal to not be deported, who has then committed further crimes.
And Sam, if you stick up for him on this...
I don't think Sam will. I don't think he can.
I will be appalled if you stick up for him with this.
What I will say is that, he's obviously got a track record, an exemplary track record, because he, we are picking out things here. No, we're picking out.
Did you say he's got an exemplary track record apart from that bit?
Well, no, if you work in a certain area for years and years and years, he didn't all he did was of course, he would never want somebody not to be deported if they were a child rapist, which I don't think would have been his idea to have been I know, let's attack Rishi on this. It would have been to do with his PR team, what should we go for? Let's go for these dirty politics. I think it's mudslinging, and I think it's out of order. It is mudslinging, and so obviously people have gone back into his track record and found something with what we were just talking about, which obviously looks like it reeks from the outside. So I think this is dirty politics. Let's not go into people's track records, and let's have a look at have a look to the future.
Hang on, just to confirm something I said. I think I got something a bit muddled up, but I don't think Fabian did not commit other crimes after this. But the fact that Keir Starmer stopped the deportation. Nothing's been confirmed.
But it's still the family of the victims.
Yeah, of course.
You're always going on about the victims, Sam.
And
the victims of this man, Henry.
I think it's appalling. I think he should have been deported.
Well, look, anyway, let's just see what's going on. Let's see what our viewers think of that, because the show's nothing without them. Let's welcome them onto the show. Their opportunity to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 3 today. Let's start with Brian in Solihull. Brian.
Nana, how are you?
Hello. Yes. What do you think?
I think trying to pin this on Keir Starmer, the government has been in power, no? And they're the ones responsible. They're the ones who have, in terms of the legal system, absolutely botched it up. And that's the reason that the things that we would like to see happen, society at large, aren't happening. And, in terms of bullying, Lizzie, a lot of respect for Lizzie. She mentioned the word bullying behaviour. Rishi Sunak has a deputy who's just been done for bullying. So look, let's stop trying to pin things on Keir Starmer that's just like an attack from the outside that we're trying to say that he's the one attacking. Let's get real here, and let's say that the government has been in power and they should have done more.
Yeah, but this isn't the point. The point is that there's a campaign going on that Keir Starmer and his party are behind, that are criticising a political party and Rishi Sunak specifically, are making claims that don't seem a bit odd, because we know that Rishi wouldn't want a child sex offender not to go to prison, and yet it turns out that he's done things that may have been in a similar vein. Let's go to the lovely Dr. Seshni in Milton Keynes. Seshni.
Good afternoon, Nana. You look absolutely amazing, by the way. Stunning in red.
Thank you. So what do you think?
Nana, I have to agree with you and with Lizzie. Sorry, Brian. But no, I do agree. I think that Keir Starmer's campaign is going to come back to bite him. What most of the comments we've heard this afternoon, a lot of people are saying he's coming across as a hypocrite and as a comedian. So I do think Lizzie made a few good points about him lacking substance. I do agree with that. And he's not giving us anything. So I think he needs to review his campaign and review what he's saying about Rishi Sunak. You know, he's Prime Minister at the end of the day, Rishi Sunak. So he needs to be careful. But yes, I do think it is going to come back and bite him. Thank you, Nana.
Alan McNeely, you're calling there in Grimsby.
Good afternoon, Nana. Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's a total own goal, Nana. He was head of the DPP from 2008 to 2013. What did he do about the grooming gangs? Not a lot, I think. He sat on the sentencing council that allowed people to not go to prison who had committed these crimes. He recently voted against tougher sentencing bill that's just gone through Parliament, so he voted against that. He's a man of no substance whatsoever. He talks about the non-dom status, and this is his great champion horse about getting money. This is a man who negotiated the deal so that he pays no tax whatsoever on his pension, despite the fact that the rest of us have to pay up. You've only got to look at his policy on migration, and you've got to look at the makeup of the Labour Party to say that you actually want these people in power.
Brian, I don't know. It's not Brian, it's Alan. And I don't know about his policies on migration because I don't think he said anything about them. Listen, thank you so much, Brian and Solihull. Seshti and Milton Keynes, Alan in Grimsby, always a pleasure. Those are my great British voices. Very quickly, let's move on to another story that caught my eye today. Barry Humphries, who passed away today, aged 89 after being hospitalised for complications after hip surgery. He was King Charles' old-time favourite. As Dame Edna, he infiltrated the royal box, leaving the then Prince Charles and Camilla in hysterics. And legendary comedian Jim Davison told GB News that he thinks that Barry was the greatest and wittiest comedian of all time. A tragic loss, Lizzie. You actually met him as Dame
I did
Edna.
actually meet him, and Jim Davison's totally right, a comic genius. I was very lucky enough to meet him. It was actually on the Lorraine Kelly show where Lorraine was interviewing him, and he had us all in hysterics because Lorraine had his book in her hand, and he went, "Darling, does anyone have to tell you, when you interview someone, it's very rude to read a book when you're interviewing them." But she had his book. But he was so funny, and the names he had on his show, the Day Made for Average show, and he used to take the mickey. I remember Cliff Richard, where he got up, interrupted his songs, dancing around him. But it was just something else. Probably the funniest man of our generation. Fantastic.
Bless.
All I can say is hello, possums.
He was very good, wasn't he?
And also, a friend of mine was writing on Facebook today, how we, I watched Dame Edna when I was growing up, and here we are. It's, he was a drag queen, Dame Edna was a drag queen, and and here was a drag queen, being very entertaining to children, and obviously, and to everyone. So exactly, absolutely lovely.
But
Just like
Patterson.
Who was the worst?
Don't even start talking about drag queen story out because that's different.
It's not any different really because Dame Edna was on television, Lily Sandwich was on television. We all watched them when we were going to. There's no difference. It was age appropriate. It was age appropriate for us when we were growing up. So I mean, it's very suddenly.
Sorry. Dame Edna's show was on in the evening, late at night.
It was an evening show.
Early evening.
Nobody's saying there's anything wrong with drag queens and things like that. We're talking about story hour. Yeah. I don't think they belong in schools.
I think it's a bit snowflakey to say that they don't belong in schools.
I don't think so. I think that's
one of
they don't belong there.
Most, unbelievably funny, and I had so many belly laughs. So,
me too.
Thank you.
Really, me too. And do you remember when Madge used to fall down the stairs? That was my favourite. And then when they got real Madge from Neighbours to be there and her fall down the stairs. Classic. R.I.P. R.I.P.
A real loss, but a fabulous person nonetheless, and left a serious mark on this country and many countries all over the world. But right now it's time for our quick fire quiz. It's the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories that are hitting the headlines right now. Joining me, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, your buzzer. And also political commentator Sam Dowler, your buzzer. Right, so question one, please play along at home. Firefighters in Staffordshire were recently called out for a Poundland, but why? Is it A, to rescue a pigeon, B, to put out a fire, or C, to rescue a trapped child? Lizzie Cundy.
A.
What was that?
Pigeon.
A pigeon, Sam Dowler?
Why is there not D to get those sweet, sweet deals?
It was
I say C.
pigeon. It was a pigeon, Sam. Yes, a pigeon. Gone are the days of rescuing cats in trees. Now it's birds who can fly.
Unbelievable.
From shops. Right, question two. True or false? A Japanese vending machine has made the headlines this week due to it selling a beer mat. Yes. What do you think, Sam Dowler?
I would say it's true because there's been Japanese vending machines that sell knickers and stuff.
Fake because I'm going to go.
Well, it is true because the bear is even listed as a vulnerable species. The bear mats, actually, I'd love to see.
That's quite awful.
Yeah.
Oh, just a bit.
Right, question
unbearable.
Oh, very good.
I can't even bear it.
I can't bear to think about it. Don't go bear. No, that one was bad.
No, that was...
Question three, that was rubbish. It's deplorable. It was rubbish. Question three, a Conservative MP had warned that a popular food item could vanish from our plates due to the shortages. But what food is it? Is it A, Scotch egg, B, scampi, or C, pickles? Lizzie Cundy.
I'm going for B, scampi.
I'm going for A, Scotch egg, because there's a lot of elements to a Scotch egg. Scotch egg.
D is scampi.
No!
Do you remember the scampi and lemon crisps? And somebody had them, you'd be like, get away from me.
Oh my God, my partner bought me the whole thing from the pub where there was like 18 packets and I mowed through them all.
Did you? And then I bet he didn't let you kiss him after that.
No one wants to kiss me.
Yes, due to visa issues with foreign fishermen, Britain could be seeing the end of scampi. Do you like scampi?
Oh,
I like it. It tastes good, but it smells bad.
I love it, but it's langoustines or prawns, isn't it?
I love it,
Scampi and chips.
Question four. A Russian woman was fined for saying Vladimir Zelensky was handsome. But how much was she fined for in pounds? Closest answer wins.
I know, there's £600.
Lizzie Cundy, do you impress the person?
700.
Actually, Sam Dowler, you didn't know it. It's £393, but you do win because you're the closest answer.
Thank you.
Do either of you think Zelensky is handsome?
Yes.
No.
No.
I do, he's a hottie.
Is it
vertically challenged?
Oh, Lizzie.
Yeah, he's not that
you
tall.
and your tall, you and your tall problems.
Colour.
Yeah, because he's at war, Lizzie.
I know,
He's probably not got a war wardrobe.
Sorry, he doesn't have, like, you know, Gucci suits like Rishi Sunak.
Question five. Which fictional story is now receiving a gender shake-up? Is it A, Peter Pan, B, Cinderella, C, Pinocchio? Sam Dowler.
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan. What do you think?
Cinderella.
It's Peter Pan, you're right, yes. The upcoming Disney movie is set to feature a group dubbed the Lost Girls. I wonder what piece of literature will get woke next.
It's not woke to include people.
No.
That's what it's about.
It is.
It's inclusion. It's making people feel included.
Join the civil servant.
On today's show, we've been asking, should the nurses strike? But the winner of that was Sam Dowler, 3-2, I think it was. Should the nurses strike be declared illegal? According to our Twitter poll, 67% of you say yes. 33% of you say
Interesting.
no. Thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie Cundy, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you. And also political commentator Sam Dowler. Thank you so much, Sam. Lovely to see you.
You too.
Again. I'm not going to
I don't.
And a huge thank you to you for your company. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Don't forget, joining me will be the lovely Christine Hamilton and also the fabulous Danny Kelly. Stay tuned on GBNews, so much more to come. We've got Saturday's 5, and of course Mark Dolan later on. Take care. I'll see you later.
Hello there, very good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Vautry. A mixture of showers and longer spells of rain to greet us throughout Sunday, all thanks to low pressure being in charge of our weather and bringing us relatively unsettled conditions. The isobar is relatively spaced out across much of Northern Ireland, England and Wales and into southern Scotland, so winds will remain relatively light throughout Saturday evening, and that will just allow some of these bands of rain to be relatively slow moving. The main one pushing into areas of southern England as we head towards later on in the night, but generally a lot of cloud around as we head throughout, and that will hold temperatures up around 5 or 6 degrees Celsius for most, but perhaps down into low single figures where we do see some shelter in rural spots. So a cloudy start to Sunday.